So good morning and thank you for your attendance today. We're now live on the web, and the meeting has begun. And we apologise for the slightly late start. So first of all, we have on our agenda apologies. Sam, do we have any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillor Richard Tudge and Tim Reid, our church rep.
Okay. So Matthew, we hope might arrive at some point?
Yes, we haven't got apologies from Matthew.
Okay. Declarations of interest in any party whip? No. I'm going to raise this now rather than later. If our discussion on the budget begins to focus on any of the amendments for Council tomorrow, if that is a line of inquiry you wish to pursue, I would allow it, because I think it's in the public interest to do so. But I would say that if it is your group's amendment that we are discussing, you need to be clear about which hat you're wearing. And by that I mean, if, let's say for the sake of argument, you wished to discuss the Labour amendment, if you wanted to do that, you may not, then Richard would be free to make the case and answer any questions relating to that amendment. So you become a witness, not an OSPB member. And it's possible that other members of the OSPB may wish to ask you questions. Josh, let me just finish and then I'll come in. I was about to say the same thing applies if the mood of the meeting was that you wish to scrutinise any amendment going to Council tomorrow, including the Lib Dem amendments. If that is a line of inquiry people wanted to pursue, then Josh and Mel, I'm sure you'd understand that I would be saying to you, wear that hat rather than a scrutiny hat. I only wear scrutiny hat. Okay, that would be my proposal. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute we even do this, but in the event that some of you wish to, we'd need to establish some ground rules before we enter that discussion. Josh.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure I thought we all had our scrutiny hats on at all point, and also we don't cross-examine members of here. If we're going down that line, does that mean I can ask the three members at the back about the budget, or is it just to the cabinet? I don't know. You've got to have it every way. And then does that also mean I can talk to the people who haven't put an amendment in and ask them why they haven't put an amendment in?
So Josh, you're absolutely right. It's a minefield. It's an absolute minefield. And if you were to go down that route, we could have a long debate about whatever we get usually comes from the cabinet. And on that basis, what would the position then be of the OSBB members who are members of the administration? So I'm hoping we won't go there, Josh. And if it appears that it's impossible to get any broad consensus about how we do it, then we won't do it. It simply won't happen. And it may not happen anyway, because the discussion may not take us into that area. But if it does, either we don't allow it, or we allow it, but you can't cross-examine. When it's a group motion, I think it's pretty explicit about who the signatories are and who are supporting it. And in that circumstance, I think you should graciously say, I'm going to take the role of the proposer of the amendment and answer any questions on it, because you're well placed to do so. But if it's going to create a problem, we simply won't do it.
Sorry, Chair, I don't admit to sort of give a lifeline here. I don't think it's entirely fair to colleagues around here, because actually you may be in the group, but you may not have authored it. I would really say full council tomorrow will have so many people who can debate it. We're here to scrutinise the budget by the administration and not the amendments by the opposition. So I wouldn't feel comfortable scrutinising amendments.
I echo that as well.
Okay. It's decided today then that we won't stray into discussing or scrutinising the amendments. They'll stand or fall on their own 2 feet tomorrow morning. Okay, that's really helpful. That's cleared that, because I didn't want to enter into that discussion and before we'd actually thought it through. Okay, so that's that done. We're moving on now to, now we're going to switch the agenda around, which I'm sure everybody is now aware.
We're here. Public participation.
There was no public participation. So we're going to move the agenda around now to accommodate Paul and Joe and Rob, who are not able to attend until 11 o'clock. So once we've done all the other business and we're not at 11 o'clock, there will be a recess until 11 o'clock. I'm really sorry. I'm very angry about it. You don't need to tell me how angry you are. I'm angry about it. Because we were discussing it in another place, how we need to respect the functionality of scrutiny. Gosh, Josh, we're never going to get onto it, but we have got an hour, I suppose, so yeah, fill it.
Do we know why they're not here till 11 o'clock, just out of interest? 'Cause
We don't know the reason why, but the leader and the deputy leader did say that they could attend the meeting from 11 o'clock onwards.
So we're going to, I suspect they're busy preparing the ground for Thursday's council meeting, I would imagine. So we're going to go down the list of panels now. I invite you to give us a response about your most recent meeting, and we're going to go around the table. And I'm looking at Josh first, actually. Josh, go for it first. Tell us about your panel.
I gave an update at the last OSPB because we have, not met since, unless I've slept through it. So, thanks.
Yeah, Chair, we're the same. Our last panel was just before the last OSPB. Thank you.
Richard, you don't chair a panel, but we are, by all means, tell us about.
Well, I often speak to myself, and it's quite an intelligent conversation. But there is obviously there are a number of issues which we discussed at our crime and disorder meeting last year, which I do think need to be followed up, and I'll be in the process of doing that after speaking to officers about what those issues are.
Yes, we had a meeting. We squeezed a special meeting in to look at school sufficiency because as a panel we felt we needed to look at that and do some pre-cabinet scrutiny ahead of recommendations, and we did make some recommendations. It was a really good meeting, really full meeting. Both cabinet members were there and answered questions. I'm sorry they weren't actually, it was only Councillor Foster because Councillor Bowen didn't need to be there, I don't think. So, and credit where credit's due. It's actually quite uplifting to hear that Worcester's commitment to send books to trend shown in other reform-led councils, so I'm quite pleased about that at this stage. Obviously, we'll be keeping a close eye on it. But being careful not to disclose anything of a commercially sensitive nature, because we did have to go into private session during that meeting. The panel welcomed and were fully supportive of the Cabinet members' responsibility for education's recommendations. So, to enable Regency High Special School to seek approval from DfE to change the age range of the school and therefore increase special school places in Worcester City, and also to request that the DfE continue to deliver the Enterprise Academy, which is the autism-free special school in Malvern, working with the County Council and McIntyre Academy Trust, who are the partner there, to deliver the school at the earliest opportunity. That's really important because we know it's already delayed, but that was the recommendation given to Cabinet as opposed to receiving a lump sum of, I think, about £5.4 million to be absorbed into mainstream education for SEND provision. So as a committee, we fully supported that choice and backed up that recommendation from the Cabinet member, because we think that it acknowledges the fact that some children just can't be educated sufficiently in a mainstream education provision, and it will help to meet their needs. We did make the point, though, that as a committee, we don't want children to be and young people to be travelling to school any longer than necessary at either end of a school day. So it was a really good committee meeting, and the cabinet, obviously we supported the Cabinet's recommendations anyway, but we did have a very good discussion around it, so I was pleased about that.
Now, whilst we've got you, what's your take on the government's proposals for SEND, which we've heard about in the last 48 hours?
So yes, exactly, within the last 48 hours. So it's early days. I know that they were going to be pushing for most young people to be educated in mainstream education, and that's where the funding is going to be going, I think. I don't disagree with that. I'm a bit concerned about the rhetoric I'm hearing around EHCPs, and I know that some parents will be worried about that, but I don't have enough detail at this point in time to know how it's going to affect people. At the moment, going forward, it looks like only those young people and children and young people with the highest needs, and I'm yet to see a definition of what that is. I have asked in response to the Send white paper, the LGA put forward a response yesterday that I contributed to, and I said, you know, we really need to have an understanding of what these categories are. When I worked in education, there were categories called School Action and School Action Plus that young people with additional needs were kind of assessed as having, and it looks like we're going back to a similar type of model with school assessments and then the EHCPs on top of that for only those children and young people with the highest need. There was an emphasis placed on more partnership working with the ICBs, where you've got an ICB in place, and with the police. Now that worries me because all three organisations, really, local government, the police and ICBs, are undergoing a lot of turmoil and change at the moment, and financial pressures. So I'm unclear about whether that's going to be successful and what will happen when we hit some bumps in the road. I don't think enough attention was given to high needs deficits and what we need to be doing between now and when the statutory override kicks in April 2028, and also home to school transport. There's been not enough covered around that at the moment. So, I mean, in the 48 hours that I've had to read some of it and digest it, I've got some questions, is my accurate kind of summary. Hope that helps.
That was really, really interesting, Nat, your initial take on it. I think the comment about it creating more questions than providing answers is really good. I can remember a time in Worcestershire where we were closing specialist schools like Thornton House, which were brilliant. And we had failed those children in mainstream, which is why they ended up there. And what I'm worried about, Nat, having skimmed through it, is the rhetoric's fine, but the reality on the ground in providing for that child with special needs, I'm unconvinced it can necessarily be provided in a mainstream environment. And, you know, I'm worried. Now, Richard, should we let Richard come in?
Thank you, Chair. You were always very kind to me. I actually agree with you. I don't believe that many children can actually cope in mainstream education, and that we need to make allocations and awareness for them. It's a nice, noble pledge to encourage children to go mainstream, but I've seen so many children suffer the consequences of being forced to mainstream to realise it's not right for everybody. The question which I have, and I've only seen the headlines of what was in this end report, is the intention to recruit and employ considerably more educational psychologists and other professionals. I'm not sure the employment market is capable of providing those specialist services at this stage, and I think that's got to be considered as a long-term objective rather than a short-term one, because I don't believe they can actually recruit the people required to do that kind of work very quickly.
Yeah, just if I may come back, that's a really good observation and really good point, well made. There's been some talk at the moment around this extending to parliaments, and obviously there could be a change in Parliament, who knows? But that's a good example. Also, the training of early years practitioners and the early intervention focus, that's going to need a lot of input too. So the headlines are vaguely impressive, but I'm not sure about the detail.
You need to get the minister to your panel and interrogate them. Seb, you're next.
Yeah, and just echoing what everyone else said, we haven't met since the last OSPB, though it is worth noting, and I know we discussed in our pre-meet, a number of outstanding recommendations have yet to be responded to, and I do know at last OSPB we agreed that Cabinet members would make an effort to try and talk to panel chairs who sit within their portfolio, and I'm yet to have any contact from any Cabinet member who may look after my area, and yeah, it's disappointing coming up to the budget when my area looks after Corp and Comms, where perhaps great savings could be implemented, that we've had no correspondence. But other than that, I think everyone's happy.
I'm really pleased people are happy. Just to pick up the point, I did attend the Cabinet meeting on behalf of OSPB last time round, and I specifically raised the point about reintroducing briefings, particularly for lead scrutiny members and the Cabinet members. And this morning, when I've got Paul and Joe in front of us in a bit, I'm going to make that point again, and it needs to be set in diaries. I'm assuming that's what we want to do. Okay, it's going to involve more time off work for Josh, and potentially Marcus, and we need to be mindful of that.
And Seb and Mal and
Well, absolutely.
Natalie
I
and
don't know.
Karen
I don't
and
know
Richard,
what they
I
all.
think.
Josh, I don't know what they all do. So forgive me. But I think we're committed to doing this, aren't we? So we will reinforce it this morning. Karen, now Hoss did meet because I was there.
We did meet. And we met on the 11th of February. We had a very good discussion around our annual update for public health. It moved on to immunisation, of which you'll probably have seen in the press. There's an outbreak of measles again and people not getting their MMR vaccinations, which is really, really important. A side effect of not having your vaccination and contracting measles can lead to deafness. I had a personal story. I had a great uncle who was profoundly deaf from the age of 18 months due to measles. So really messaging, make sure measles. Now, vaccination will fall within the ICB from, it was going to be from April 2026. It's now going to be April 2027. And when I raised the fact when it was going to be April 2026 at the Local Government Association Health and Wellbeing Committee, I'm really pleased that we were listened to and it's been pushed back to April 2027 because as Councillor McVeigh said, we've got a lot of churn in the system, and I think with local government reorganisation, the extension of the footprint for the Integrated Care Board from Herefordshire, Worcestershire to Warwickshire as well, we need to look at the bigger picture here. And with 50% funding cuts as well coming forward as part of our ICB, it draws some concerns into this area. So the work that the public health team here are doing is upper and foremost in everybody's minds, I'm sure, because health's really important. So absolutely welcome their report. They're very much on the message and working together collaboratively to make sure we get and try and achieve the best outcomes for our population of Worcestershire. The second item was the overview from the West Midlands Ambulance Service, and that was really important because from the morning of the HOSC meeting, we had a new patient flow system introduced. We will have the feedback, and we've programmed it in to have further feedback on this. This is how you're processed when you land an accident and emergency. But we did have an ask from the ambulance service if we would look at an independent capacity review for the ambulances as well. So we're putting that onto the programme, and I'm working with the ladies in DEM services to bring that forward. But actions, we all like actions from this scrutiny, and we've got a list here to add waiting times and outcomes to the work programme. March and April meetings we've already assigned, but to request an update on improving urgent patient flow, including urgent community response services, including virtual wards, and West Midlands Ambulance Service to the May meeting, because I want to track this really closely, because we keep seeing in the press about waiting times, etc. We've got to get ahead of the curve where we possibly can. And to bring forward frailty and progress with implementation of the new strategy and end-of-life care. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Karen. You may or may not be aware of a proposal by the Forest of Dean District Council. What am I talking about? I'm talking about a new town, literally a stone's throw from our boundary, and I mean a stone's throw. It is just a ditch between the two, to the south-west of Worcestershire, within the Malvern Hills range. And I was in a meeting last night where one of the doctors was talking about Worcester A&E still being the closest, because I jump on the M50, it's 15 minutes. And it's important that our health providers, especially A&E and acute, are aware of the potential increase in demand, because it's one of those things that isn't on our radar, because it's not quite in Worcestershire, but it's right next, literally right next to the boundary. The other side, it's Pendock. If you know Pendock and Barrow, it's just down the road to Gloucester. Anyway, I'll just throw that out there because we need to be aware of this.
Thank you for that. We need to track that.
Yeah. Marcus, anything from you?
I kicked off, if you recall. We haven't met since the last.
I did, but we did. We did that in the pre-meet.
Yeah,
But
nothing as we've not met since the last meeting.
Okay.
Literally the Fridays we then met on the Monday for OSPD.
Okay. Sorry, I was just going. I know there's a sense we do it twice, really. This isn't. We're not careful. Okay. So, have I missed anybody? Okay. The next thing we're going to do is look at the work programme. And Richard?
On the work programme, I think a number of members, including myself, raised the issue of inviting Royal Mail to come in. I'm still getting continuous, numerous complaints about delayed mail. And I do wonder if this is something we can encourage and bring forward as soon as possible, because people are losing out.
It's a very big issue, and it's one that's worthy of scrutiny. We have written to the post office. We've had no response. This morning, there's a... So I'm going to take advantage of the chief exec being with us this morning and ask him if he'd make representations at the highest level to persuade someone to come along and talk about post office services in Worcestershire. So I'm going to take the opportunity of talking to Paul this morning and asking him if he can intervene on our behalf, because it's a big, big issue out there. I'm sure we're all aware of it in our own division.
I think it's fair to say that Ofcom have issued serious fines to Royal Mail, but one of the sorting offices which they've identified as being a significant problem is Worcester.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so we're going to take advantage of Paul being here this morning to help ask him to assist us. Moving on to the work programme. Josh, you're first.
Thank you, and obviously I've emailed you on this. And actually, not my words, as a Bromsgrove councillor, the cabinet members' words for education, who said this is one of his biggest issues that are facing the county, and not something that just one political party. So, you know, Councillor May has been raising the concerns about high school provision in Bromsgrove for a while. It is as tricky as you can get to try and get more education places for high schools with the PFI contract and the consequences of even trying to build on North Bromsgrove High School or South Bromsgrove High School's land with loads of development coming forward within Bromsgrove and no local plan. We need to have something together to be able to go back to some of these developers to say this is what we want. So I think we really need to be able to do it. There's space in the calendar to be able to do it, and as I said, the cabinet member said it was the biggest thing that's on his agenda.
Thank you very much. With my other hat on as leader of Bromsgrove District Council, I have significant concerns about this. We're not carrying 5% capacity. We have only one middle school that we can potentially extend, which isn't under a PFI agreement. And we are currently having to bus children around the district of Bromsgrove, and it's quite considerable. We've got rurality issues with people getting buses, etc. The latest issue is I've got somebody who lives opposite South Bromsgrove High School who's struggling to get access there. I've got Bromsgrove School where I've got pupils coming out of the private sector to try and get back into mainstream education. So it's a terrible constraint. And also, I don't think, like Councillor McVeigh raised earlier, it's very fair to ask young people to be travelling an hour around the county to get to school and an hour back. I think it's unfair. And the friendship groups and the after-school activities then become even more increasingly difficult for the pupils to take part in. But it is a significant concern. And I first raised this in 2022. This isn't something that I've suddenly raised. I have been banging this drum considerably. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to pause and talk about this for a moment before we go on to anything else. So yesterday I had a meeting with Directorate to talk specifically about this and see where we are. It was a really interesting conversation, and clearly the Bromsgrove members are far more up to speed than I am. But I've got some information that I can give you today, and some I would give you privately because I wouldn't want to expose us to any risk in terms of buildings and land use and things like that. What I'm going to suggest is this. Clearly, Natalie's panel is the appropriate panel, and they can do whatever they like with this matter. Okay, they can discuss it, they can whatever they want. It seems to me that this impacts on not just the town of Bromsgrove, but the wider community, because that's the catchment we're talking about for the two schools, the North and South, which I'm told are both great schools, by the way. That's what I'm hearing. What I'm going to suggest, the officers felt that a task and finish at this stage wouldn't add any value to where we are right now, because they believe work's in progress. This is what they tell me. It's been suggested that the Bromsgrove County councillors whose divisions include the catchment, of which there are 8, have established diary dates for repetitive meetings on this. Now, they're called bad meetings, and by that I mean briefings and discussions, so that you guys are completely up to speed and feel like you're driving it. I would suggest that one of you, possibly Karen or Josh, chairs it. Okay. It would involve a meeting at the beginning of each term. So the first one will be diaried for mid-April, 7 weeks' time. That would then routinely sit at the beginning of every term from that point onwards. If during that process you feel, guys, that there's a task and finish to be done, by all means come back to us and say, let me just finish, and then I'll come to you, Karen, I promise. Officers are clear in their minds to me yesterday that a task and finish at this point in the journey wouldn't deliver anything that isn't already happening. Now, this is what they're telling me. If Natalie's panel want to instigate a task and finish or producing their own work programme, effectively the same thing, that's entirely up to Natalie and her panel. What I'm trying to do is broker a way forward so Josh and Karen feel you are actively involved in this. Now, I'm told that the financing for next year is in place, so there's no immediate crisis. So this is what I'm told yesterday. So 26, 27, I'm told that funding issue, those 2 schools, the funding issues, both capital and revenue, are now in place. But going beyond that point, I'm told there are issues to be resolved, and there are options on the table which we can't discuss today for reasons that are obvious to you. Now, if you don't like that idea, we don't have to do it, and we can not have those meetings. If you want to replace it with a task and finish, I think the board need to understand the criteria we're using to agree that, because what I'm offering is all the county councillors involved in that catchment. That's the deal on the table. One of you chairs it. It's a quarterly meeting. It's working with the officers to look at the long-term options. It's effectively a task and finish, but one that's got a monitoring role as well. Okay, that's the sales pitch on behalf of officers yesterday. Josh.
In short, I don't think that's the right process to be able to do it. And as just a quick point about saying that the task and finish group is best to go to Children's, to me, and I'm not talking for the chair at Children's, but they have an overview of the whole of the county. And if we were going to go down that route, I don't know why we've got some possible future task groups on our work programme that wouldn't have been put onto Children's, so we can't have it both ways on that. Just having what would I define as a talking shop once every term to decide what's going to happen about kids going to different schools is not what we should be doing. There is a real serious issue within Bromsgrove about school provision. You know, we have got quite a lot of speculative developments coming forward. I can think of probably over 1,000 homes just on the A38 that developers are talking about. We don't have the capacity. Last year, over 20 children didn't get into North and South Bromsgrove. There's 1 year that potentially dips. After that, it goes up considerably. We need to be able to do a task and finish group to be able to get everything out and to be able to look at different options. There is potential with local government reorganisation that parcels of land become available. Let's talk about it and see whether we can build provision on them. But just talking about it once a term, I just think would be just a massive talking shop.
I agree. In essence, this is critical now. We've got 12,125 homes to build. The one school alone for 1,500 potential homes will cost £70 million. There's not a developer out there that will build that school. And the situation is so dire now to try and get people into the area and to educate locally that I don't think we can just... I can't sit through a talking shop when I've been asking for 4 years for some action on this.
Sorry, again, to give that credit back to Councillor May. I might have brought this today, but I know Councillor May has been raising it for a considerable amount of time.
Okay. What I would suggest... Oh, sorry, Mel, go on.
Chair, yeah, thank you. With obviously Bromsgrove, and actually want Natalie's history to be able to update, but we have a critical issue in Worcester, and it's been full council where we don't have sufficiency, and a lot of Worcester pupils are going to Malvern, etc. So I think it does also need to be looked at. It is very urgent, yeah, county-wide strategically, and we do really need to sort it out because it's not been working for a long time. Thank you.
I mean, I would say that the issue you're describing is replicated to a degree in Malvern as well, with one school with surplus places, the other one is absolutely full, and now we're talking about busing children from Worcester to Malvern to fill those vacancies. And we've got a problem now with Hanley Swan and the new town we're talking about a moment ago and where they go to school. Okay, so I'm going to... You're clearly pushing back on the suggestion of having a meeting with local members. Okay, so now someone needs to put forward on paper for our next meeting what this task and finish would be to do, its criteria for who is going to be on it, and what it's setting out to achieve. That needs to be properly presented to this board for its consideration. We can't go forward without that rationale. So that would be something I'm throwing out to Karen or to Josh now. It's Natalie's panel. I know it's a parochial issue in Bromsgrove. It is one that's replicated elsewhere in the county. Nat?
Well, just picking up on that point, the school sufficiency annual report was discussed at one of our last meetings, not the very last one. And rightly so, you know, questions were raised, just to reiterate the point you made, from members across the county, actually, including at primary school provision level and secondary school, and where there are middle schools. So I wouldn't disagree in it being the task and finish, but I do think that a county-wide aspect would be helpful. But also, as it seems that there is a bit of a discrepancy between some of the questions asked and some of the questions given and the experience on the ground, is there an opportunity to have a meeting relatively quickly to try and challenge some of the answers that have been given in terms of real terms, what the situation's like? I think Karen and Josh were disagreeing a little bit about what some of the information that was shared. So is there a more immediate meeting that could take place, Tom?
So this is a parochial issue, but there are wider ramifications beyond Bromsgrove because the same housing growth is occurring elsewhere.
But the thing about Bromsgrove is our two high schools are PFI
I understand
schools,
that.
so that we literally cannot expand them. Whereas we're talking about, and I don't want to pit an area against another area, but we're talking about Worcester. There were £30 million given in capital programme. You can't give that to the schools in Bromsgrove because they cannot viably then run their schools due to the PFI contract. The PFI contract is still going to run for over a decade, as far as I'm aware. You know, we need to be able to get a solution to this, and that's why I'm bringing it to this panel.
I think officers are more than aware of that and are working very hard, they assure me, to address the issues you're describing, Josh. But the gauntlet is thrown this morning. If Natalie needs to be involved too, if you want to construct a bid for a task and finish and create the rationale and what that could do that isn't happening now, in other words, the added benefit of the investment of time for officers and members in doing that, set that out clearly, and the board will assess it at the next meeting. Nat? Sorry, Richard, you wanted to say then?
I was basically going to say something very similar to what you've just said. I think it does need to be a county-wide study. I understand the urgency for Bromsgrove, but the issue is not unique to Bromsgrove. There are problems across the county, which is why we've got to have to look at it en masse as a strategic issue. I think if we come back with terms of reference to the next OSPB and set up a task and finish panel at that next OSPB, I think that's the way forward. I think that's the only clear way which we can do it. But I would be nervous about being parochial. It's got to be strategic, because what affects Bromsgrove will affect Worcester, will affect Redditch, will affect everywhere else. It's got to be a strategic study rather than just a parochial one.
This is a salutary reminder for when people in the 1990s used PFI as a way forward. The only show in town, I think, was described at the time. The long-term legacy of that is exactly what Josh is describing, where we're hamstrung and the costs involved in these two schools because of their PFI status is a real issue now. Now, I don't know what you think about Richard's view that this shouldn't be just Bromsgrove, because that's what he's just tabled. Karen?
I think whilst I acknowledge other areas have concerns and challenges, Bromsgrove is, as Councillor Robinson just said, really severely impacted because it's not only the centre Bromsgrove schools, it's your Whittles, it's your Ralph churches, it's your middle schools, it's your primary schools that have been built. It extends across the whole educational offer. And the problem we have is that we're doing this piecemeal term by term. So we rock up and we say, okay, we found 30 this term. Next term, we've got this shortfall. It's too late once we're in the situation. 2038, I believe these PFIs end. And the plan's up to 2040. So we can't build 12,000 houses in 2 years, Chairman.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest that Karen and Josh and Natalie get together and wordsmith a bid for task and finish status on this issue. Richard, I think a county-wide one is a heck of a job, and I'm not sure about the outcomes it would achieve. So a task and finish, the purpose of a task and finish is more than just to ask questions. It's to find solutions that are affordable and deliverable. Okay, that's what a task and finish does. Something beyond what officers are already doing. Okay, that's what you have to make that case that you're not comfortable with status quo and a task and finish is the only way forward. You believe, and you need to set out your case. Mel.
Chair, yeah, I would like to push back on that, and I do think it is a strategic issue. I mean, even, my daughter's just about to finish, she's in her last year at university. Even when she went to high school, people could not get the places they required then. It is an issue, and it is a big issue for Worcester. And I think if we look at one area, we're going to be missing a trick, and obviously we've got LGR coming along as well. I know it's a big piece of work, but I think it's important to be strategic.
Yes, I would support Richard in this, that it ought to be county-wise, because we have exactly the same situation in Redditch. We have people coming into Aswood Bank School from Studley, which is in Warwickshire, and other areas like that, because of the freedom of choice. So I believe it's a Worcestershire problem. I understand that Bromsgrove has a short-term problem, as it were, but Redditch has a short-term problem as well. There are 4,500 houses to be built in and around Redditch. Where are we going to send those children to school? I have no idea. So I think it's a longer-term thing we need to look at.
Thank you, Roger. I would say, in support of Josh, that the PFI status of these two schools is real a millstone around their neck right now, and I don't think that's replicated necessarily elsewhere. Okay, sounds like we've got competing bids. Great. So we've got a beauty contest coming up next time. Karen and Josh are going to produce a bid for Bromsgrove task and finish, and it sounds like Richard, Mel and Roger are going to produce a counter bid for county-wide investigation. We will, as a board, examine both and decide which, if any, go forward. Okay? We live in exciting times. And I'll relay that back to officers and say that the board has not accepted the offer of briefings and debate, but wants something rather different. Okay, that was interesting. We'll move on. We'll move on. Karen, is there anything you desperately want to say about that last point? Thank you. So looking at the work programmes then, we've agreed that we're going to see if we can persuade the post office to come attend our meetings. We must have a reputation, mustn't we, for being Royal Mail. Sorry, forgive me, we're talking about the same thing with different names. We'll see whether we can persuade them to come. Looking at OSPB then, that would be an item for the next meeting. And now we've got an item assessing counter bids for a task and finish. And then we'll have that's in March. And then in June, well, we can talk about June in March, can't we? Possible items for those meetings include local government reorganisation, And Richard, yes, crime and disorder.
No, not crime and disorder, but close. I'm looking at the forward plan from Cabinet. I'm not sure you've reached that bit yet. Okay, but there's an item on there which I do think might need to have pre-determination scrutiny, which is the biodiversity duty new entry, which is due to take place on the 16th of March. I think that is, I'm not sure what that actually entails, but I'm guessing, and I think that could be a significant piece of change of policy and work, which may require some pre-decision scrutiny.
Sounds like something for Josh's panel.
We're moving on to the forward plan.
But we are not moving on to the forward plan just yet. Richard, you did your best to hijack the agenda. We're talking about OSPB at the moment, and I thought you were going to talk about crime and disorder, safety of Worcestershire parks and open spaces, prevention of drugs and alcohol issues. No.
In fairness, Joe, I think those things can actually be removed from the work programme. They've been there for a very long time and were actually requested due to events which took place some time ago. So I think it's probably reasonable enough to suggest that they should be removed. And I think we should be looking at other things for crime and disorder for the future.
Does anyone disagree with that? Moving on to page 10 then. Now we're coming to two items here. We've already mentioned Royal Mail. And we know what we're going to try to do there. But the other one is income generation. And that's just come through in the last month or two, hasn't it, as something that people think we should be looking at. We can timetable that into our OSPB next month, I think. No, she says, not yet. Sam.
So I don't know if you recall, I put a note on there for you, Chair. So when you and I met and with the Vice Chair, we talked a bit further about it, and what you actually thought would be better to look at would be fees and charges. So I did a little bit of background digging on your behalf, and it is a little bit more complex than a one-item agenda. So it could possibly be another suggestion for a task group.
Okay, so we're stripping that down to fees and charges rather than income generation, which is slightly more than that. Sam is advising us that that wouldn't be done in one meeting. It is a task and finish. So that needs to be put together. Roger, you are keen on this. Do you want to work with officers to produce a bid for a task and finish and justify it? I can do. Okay, so we're going to have a number of task and finishes. There's nothing saying we shouldn't have two running together. There is an officer resource in doing so. Sam's looking worried. Then possible future task groups, since we're talking about task groups, youth work was suggested back in December. Public health, Karen, promotion activity including the use of social prescribing, keeping active and other preventative work.
I think Hoss could do this.
Yes. Are we listening council? Well, that's been on there for a while. I don't think anyone's particularly enthusiastic about it, apart from me. Education, health and care plans. Karen? It's Nat.
Well, it's either me or both of us, probably me. But as we digest the recommendations in the SEM white paper, I'm sure we'll be tabling that to come to the Children and Families panel.
So take it off that one then. We're going to go into your panels and invite you to talk about future agenda items for your panels, possibly. So you told us about what you've been doing recently. Sam's looking worried. I'm going off piste here. Just looking ahead then to your panels, to your next meetings. Have you got something you can tell us today, if you haven't already told us, about your next panel meeting, what you're going to be doing?
Yes.
Is that a reasonable request, Karen?
I can kick off. It's going to be about GP access and appointments, etc. Sorry, Sam?
And dental services.
Yeah, and dental services, thank you.
And wonderful time filling as well, I think we can all agree here. I was going to say, if only the leader was here on time. Our next one is looking at AI, but also looking at the members' case management system, which is very prevalent given the email we had from the Cabinet member for Highways about who we can and can't talk to in terms of our liaison. So I think that's a really timely one in March.
I'll be attending that one. Josh, what are you doing at your next meeting?
Sorry, just before I do that, just on the OSPB work programme, what are we actually discussing at the next scrutiny meeting? Because currently it's just lead members and performance board, and then the Wing and a Prayer Royal Mail say that they can come. But if they don't, what are we scrutinising?
No. And of course, crucially, Josh, we'll be talking about potentially 3 bids for task and finish and making a decision. So let's hope for Royal Mail. Let's hope that we get 3 really coherent bids together and we can discuss those. We will be talking work programme. We will talk about other things. And if there's a potential, Royal Mail would be a meeting in itself. Yeah. Okay, so that's what I'm aiming for. And I think that's the best I can answer your question.
Okay, but we had hoped that they could have come previously and they haven't responded to us, which is their right to be able to do it. So can we at least try and get fees and charges to ensure that that's on the next one? Because unless there's something else that's come to come forward, I'd like to know in advance what I'm about to think about, so as though it's watched them over a month away. So less than a month, sorry.
So Josh, we did not invite them to this meeting. Okay? We invited them to the March meeting. So it's not about kicking it down the road. That was the invitation for that meeting. And that's what we're hoping to achieve. Well, no. We know that. Okay.
If you want to hear what I'm talking about.
I would, yeah, absolutely.
Environment, I'll have to get it up because my memory's not that good.
Shall I come back to you?
No, I've got it up now. We're talking about waste and part of the Environment Act, because we talked about the other part of it
previously, and obviously that's coming a big topic coming up at both county and district. And then we're going to review the speed limit policy, because I wanted to pre-scrutinise that, but it was decided to review it before we could do that, but it's on there so we could discuss it. That's our next meeting. But on Richard's point about the pre-scrutiny bit on, what was it? Biodiversity. That decision seems to be happening prior to our next OSPB meeting. So if I smile nicely, I don't know whether we could try and get it on the 11th of March one, just so we can discuss it for the environment. So.
Yep, so we've got various items as well as regular updates coming to our next 2 panel meetings, but we are having to rejig agendas a little bit at the moment for reasons I won't go into now. But we will be, over the next 2 meetings, discussing educational outcomes, including Ofsted update on Ofsted monitoring inspections, performance, and refreshing the work programme, but also EHCP tribunals complaints and ombudsman complaints, so that's a big one for our panel. We've just touched on that briefly, which won't cover the new changes as suggested in the SEND white paper, but there we are, it's a slightly different subject. Also, Public Health are going to update us on their work with children and families. Recently they've awarded some funding to narrow inequality, which is very welcome, and also homeschool transport. So always busy and very full agendas and long meetings, so lots coming up in our panel. So 20th of March and 20th of May, or that might be being moved to the 11th of May, because I'm doing a sponsored walk on the 20th of May for MAGS, if anyone wants to join me.
Where are you walking?
Thank you.
Between Worcester and Malvern.
Not far then.
You'll be able to go along the new cycle route. Marcus.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, next meeting, we've got 2 substantive items in addition to our usual budget monitoring, etc. We're inviting representatives from Malvern Hills District Council and the Science Park to discuss Malvern Hills Science Park at the next meeting. And also, we had a bit of a discussion, because on our last agenda item we had an interesting discussion on small towns within Worcestershire, and we sort of started to talk about localism and devolving things down, particularly with whether it doesn't matter whether we have one unitary or two. You know, unitarisation brings a different a model of local government. So we're inviting CALC to discuss the work of small parish councils and having a discussion around that and the role that they play, and indeed the increasing role that they could play in unitarisation.
Whether they want to or not. Unitarisation, that's a new word for me this morning. I've not heard that word before. Thank you. Thank you. Now, have I missed anyone out? Yes, Mel, sorry.
No, Chair, just quickly, yeah, obviously the big one for us is the outcome of the CQC local authority inspection, but due to the timings, it won't be next week, it will be the one after. But we do have a lot of existing items on our work plan, and we are going to spend a lot of time at the next meeting going through those, taking some off, rejigging them, because it really does need a sort, so that will be our focus, and CQC will be the main thing coming up next afterwards. And I think it's nearly 11, so I'll end.
We've done very well, by the way. We're very adept at filling space. Unless someone's going to tell me there's something on the forward plan that they think we need to look at, then we're going to move on to the next agenda item, being 11 o'clock. So quickly look at the forward plan, would you please? Just in case there's something there that you think we should be doing some pre-scrutiny on. So obviously we're looking at the March meeting now. Sevenoaks flood risk management. That's a matter for Martin, I think. Biodiversity, adoption of advertising and sponsorship policy. That sounds a bit dry. And that's it. Right. It's about 11 o'clock. Perfect. Well, yeah, quite. I'm going to give you a 2-minute comfort break, and I mean 2, not 5 or 10, 2. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming today. If you're not a member of the board but wish to speak, just catch my eye or catch Sam's eye and we'll certainly allow you to contribute. It is a wonderful opportunity between Cabinet and full Council to get to grips with some of these issues as scrutiny is. And we may produce a brief report ahead of Council tomorrow if we feel there's something important that needs to be said. Phil Rook isn't able to attend today, but Steph's here, so we're in good hands. Councillor Rob Horton, I'm hoping will be here. We have delayed the start of this section of the meeting to allow and accommodate Joe and Rob, who have been elsewhere this morning. On behalf of the board, I have to say that that's not an ideal scenario, and we hope it won't be replicated. The dates of this meeting had been in our diaries for months. We do respect how busy people are and have other things to do. And we're particularly grateful to Paul and Steph, who have been attending quite a lot of meetings recently. And Scrutiny can really work with the cooperation of the administration. Without that, it would fall completely away. So, we're here now to discuss the Cabinet findings and the Cabinet report with the... Hi, Rob, you haven't missed a thing. I'm just warming everyone up. What I'm going to do is ask either Paul or Rob or Joe or all three to give us a brief overview about where we are right now ahead of tomorrow's crucial meeting. And allow all board members an opportunity to ask their questions. So maybe an overview. Paul looks like he's going to go for it. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, obviously we have a position where Council is tomorrow and there is a recommendation from Cabinet around the budget where a number of members were present at the Cabinet meeting. Not a huge significant change to what is in the pre-printed council papers, just to say that a number of things have been confirmed, so we can update members on the fact that we have had the letter now from government around the flexibility for council tax, where we can go up to 8.99%. I know it's reported as 9%, but if you actually set 9%, that is the referendum position, so you have to be at 8.99 just to clear any position, and the current documents that you have here are for 8.98. In terms of Cabinet meeting, we also reported to Cabinet that we've received the letter from government around the exceptional financial support amount, which is up to, and I'll just make sure I've got the right number, 59.8. 59.993. 933. 60 million broadly, but it is, so we've had that, and what's important about that is the maximum you can go to. You don't have to take all of it, but you can't go over it. So in order to use capital monies for revenue spend, normally under the local government finance regulations, you are not allowed to do that. I know in other parts of business and others, there's not got those clear rules, but for local authorities, you can't use capital to spend on revenue without permission. And effectively, what exceptional financial support does is give us that permission. What it doesn't do is give us a cheque for 59.933 million. So we don't get any money from the government. All it is, I think some people think that amount of money will come in and therefore we can cash flow it. We can't. It is effectively an overdraft. So we don't get any additional money coming in. We get the ability to be able to effectively have an overdraft and use capital monies to effectively do that, which is why ultimately you have to pay it back. And you've got up to 20 years to do that. And you do that by selling capital assets or increasing your income to be able to pay it back. So you can pay it back from revenue, you can pay it back from capital, but you have to pay it back. So it's not a cheque that's coming, it's not an additionality to our budget, it is an overdraft position, is the easiest way to think of it in layman's terms. So we've had that formal position from government, we've had the flexibility, so in effect we are in a position now where members can look at the options and can make a decision lawfully with the ability to go up to 59.933 million in terms of the EFS and potentially up to 8.99% for council tax. So that was the key point, is to allow members at their meeting to be able to make decisions, and what decisions they make are therefore legal. And that's where we've got to. That's been recommended to Cabinet, and Cabinet have approved that and forwarded it to Council, and that effectively brings us up to date. Everything else is in the papers that people will have had for Council, and there will be some minor changes in the papers, because in the ones that you've got it didn't actually have the exact amount for the 59.933, but it's very minor amendments which will be pointed out on the day in terms of just updating the positions. We hadn't had the letter when this was sent out and published. So nothing fundamentally changes. The amendments are as published, and those will go forward, and they will be debated by members, and members will make decisions whether to support them or not to support them. But ultimately, Cabinet have approved that position with the updated information from government, and we're now in a position to be able to debate it tomorrow.
Thank you, Paul. Just to say, you alluded to the amendments. We're not minded to scrutinise those amendments today, but in future, I think we should. Because if we get amendments that need some scrutiny, then we should at least give the opportunity of those people to allow scrutiny to examine those. But
I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that, Chair. We might need to have a debate about that, and a governance debate with Hazel as well. The problem is that they're potential, aren't they? Because they could all be voted down, and therefore you could spend a lot of time debating them. Of course, you can do post-decision scrutiny, and so you could look at them afterwards. But I think beforehand that could be difficult. And of course, we don't always get all of the amendments beforehand.
No. Take your point. Certainly, I've exchanged emails with Hazel in the last few days about this. Now, let's not go down this avenue because we don't need to this morning. But perhaps it's a debate to be had in another place moving ahead. Because my own view is that full council isn't necessarily the right place to get to grips with the full issues associated, the unintended consequences and everything else. So that's for another day. Rob, is there anything you'd like to add?
Not really. I think Paul's outlined exactly where we are. Nothing. I'm a man. If you don't just say anything, say nothing. So.
Okay, Hazel.
Just briefly on those points that we're making. So I think the advice I gave was that in principle, scrutiny committees have the power to review any aspect of the council's budget, which could include alternative proposals submitted by the minority groups. But what the panel would need to consider is potential conflicts on the panel. So that some members of the current scrutiny panel, if their group has put an amendment when that matter's up for discussion, are they wearing their scrutiny hat, or would they be wearing their group hat? And then in relation to full council, it is only full council which can vote on the budget, and by law that has to be a recorded vote. Similarly for amendments, they can only be adopted by full council and again by a recorded vote. So we just need to be careful that there is sufficient debate at the council meeting to ensure that members can demonstrate that they've taken into account all relevant considerations when making their vote. So whilst there may be able to be some scrutiny, I would be concerned if some of those recommendations were going to be perhaps nearly amending the amendments, if that makes sense, because they should also be in with advice as to whether or not those would be financially and legally viable.
Josh, I'm going to ask you, if you're going to talk about this point, I'd rather not, because it's a bit of a red herring this morning, because we're not going to do it this morning. I'd rather use the time to get to grips with the budget. Is that okay? If it's a really quick one,
Just a quick one to put on record that I was happy to talk about the amendments, and it would have been with my scrutiny hat on.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Hazel, as well. That was really helpful. So, Rob hasn't anything to add at this stage. Joe, is there anything you'd like to say at this point?
No, I think Paul said everything, and I know Rob didn't have anything to contribute, but seeing as we've got full council tomorrow, I think it's rather close for scrutiny. It's just the way it's fallen with the calendar, I suppose, but thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I mean, we had a conversation before we entered into a formal meeting this morning with OSPB members. There were a few things that I'd like to take the opportunity just to share with you, because you're here today. I've mentioned the point about the start of the meeting. I won't labour that point. OSPB members feel there's some work to be done in one or two areas. They would want you to do all you could, Joe, to ensure that members of all political groups populate the panels as they are required. This isn't a party political group point, it's just there were vacancies, in some cases 3 vacancies. Could you do all you could to ensure that where possible we populate those panels properly, because only if they're well attended can actually they really do any meaningful business and reflect the broad brush across the council. The second point I just want to make on behalf of... Yeah, of course. Go for it. Go for it.
Okay. With reference to the committees and the panels, I have been asked an in-depth question about that tomorrow at full council, so I think I will leave it for tomorrow and then you can hear my answer. Thank you.
That's good. The other point that OSPB would want to make this morning to you is when I came to Cabinet to report the overview and scrutiny findings for your last meeting, I made the point about trying to establish better relations between Cabinet members and OSPB leads. That might look like routine briefings and getting together and planning the work programme. Nothing seems to have happened yet on that in terms of any action. But I see you're nodding, and I think Paul's nodding too. Could we make sure that before OSPB meets next time, in other words, another month, that we can put something in place where my board members can get together routinely, not just one-off, to make sure we share what's coming down the road from a scrutiny point of view, what's coming down the road from a Cabinet point of view, and making sure that we don't end up in a situation like we are today, where we're actually scrutinising a decision that's already been made. That would be really helpful.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't at that previous meeting, the one I was yesterday, and I'm absolutely agreeing with getting together beforehand. So I'm not sure why we haven't put that in process yet, but if you want to push ahead with that, and I'm on board. Thank you.
Yes, it needs your side to convene the meetings rather than our side, if we can work on that basis. Right, sorry, we've moved on, but there was issues there that are important to board members. Right, I'm going to... Josh, go on.
Apologise straight away. The problem, I understand there's a question tomorrow about it, but the concerns are coming from our scrutiny panels. So it doesn't really matter if there's a question tomorrow or in 7 months' time. The scrutiny of us is that we are concerned that there isn't enough people, and I've said that I'm happy that I've got full attendance and full at mine, but obviously others have got concerns. So I think that answer needs to be given about how we can ensure that there are enough members filling these scrutiny panels, because it's a concern from this board.
Joe, would you like to respond?
So I think you'll be aware that back in May 2025, so last year at the AGM, there was a vote to increase those numbers, which in my view is a bit of a political tactic to create more roles on committee meetings. In previous years, when I was actually in an opposition party, I didn't attend all my meetings, but this question was never raised at any of those 4-year scrutiny meetings on OSPB. It's just now because we reform that we are. However, that's not a conclusion to it. We are working on it. The political balance has since changed yet again. I'm also aware this morning that Councillor Udall has actually come off pension as well, so that now creates another vacancy. So with the constant swapping and changing by all parties for these panels and committees, it does create an issue. So we are working on it continuously. So yeah, you have my full support that we need to fill those vacancies. But, you know, I can't drag everybody by a collar and lead to these committees. And I'm sure nobody would want that anyway. Thank you.
It wouldn't be a great look, would it, really? Hazel.
Just a point of clarification. So, look, political balance is not easy, and I'm having to wrap certainly a cold towel around my head to currently work out the current political balance we need for tomorrow. There were no extra seats created at the May AGM, so I probably have to correct that. What happened is that the size of OSPB was increased to include the vice chairs, but that didn't create extra seats on the committees. So I think we just have to be careful on that. But absolutely, Councillor Monk is right. This is not easy, creating all of this political balance, and there has been some reshaping, which I'm discussing with the group leaders, and we'll be publishing a report today to set out the new political balance on all committees going forward.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, I hope the cold towel on your head, Hazel, isn't preventing you for tomorrow. I look forward to a debate with the monitoring officer. But we are getting confused between vacancy and attendance here. It does not matter how many vacant people are not turning up as well. So actually, yes, address the attendance thing, but I have a vacancy. I've had it since May. 9 months? Are we really saying that conversation to get someone to fill a vacancy that's had no change since May should take 9 months? And if so, why do we bother? Why don't we just say, oh, we're taking as long as we want? We have to, as a scrutiny board, have an actual measurable end date in place. Otherwise, we can keep making recommendations, and we may as well go home because they're not being listened to.
Okay, I think we have had a response, and Jo says that she will do her best to ensure that these positions, these vacant positions, are filled. And I think we can ask no more further than that.
Sorry, Chair.
Josh, you
sorry.
are beginning to...
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's the role of scrutiny. The problem I have is that we've had that answer previously. I think that's why Councillor Jenkins has put the question in again. I think it's the second or third time that he's asked it. We need to be able to understand what the issue is. Is there an issue that members of Reform are unable to take those vacancies up, and then therefore we're never going to get to it, and then we can stop talking about it because, you know, what's the point if we can't fill it? Or is there going to be a chance in the next month that there are people who are able to fill those roles? If we don't get that answer, then we're just going to keep bringing it up every time.
Okay, and I'm afraid I'm going to guillotine this discussion right now because we've got a really important... Josh, I'm sorry, but we're going to go on to talk about the substantive item this morning rather than allow the meeting to spend an hour talking about reform attendees. We've had a commitment from the leader this morning that she will do all she can. I don't think we can ask any more than that. The reasons for poor attendance within her group are a group matter primarily because they're missing out on the influence that they could have. They're the big losers here, because they are missing out on the opportunity to get involved in scrutiny. So I'm not going to allow that debate to go on. I'm really sorry, Josh, but I want to move on to the substantive item this morning. So I'm going to go round the table. I'm going to start with Marcus. Marcus, have you a question or a statement you'd wish to make in association with yesterday's budget decision?
Well, there's lots I could say about yesterday's budget decision, but you know, I don't think there's anything I specifically want to scrutinise on in terms of the council tax increase proposed by the administration, because I'll save my comments for full council tomorrow. So, not at the moment, Chairman.
Have you any particular questions that you might get an answer to today that you might not in the chemistry of a full council meeting tomorrow get the same clarity? So this is the opportunity with Rob here as well to dive into any of the detail you wish.
I suppose I could ask a question of Councillor Price and congratulate him on his elevation to the
Yep.
Cabinet. He's part of the blame as to why we're now 3 vacancies on my committee as opposed to just 2. But, you know, I say that in all seriousness, congratulations. And but in your role as Doge, I just wonder, as part of this process, how much waste and inefficiency you've been able to highlight to bring out as part of this budget process.
Thank you, Chair. Don't worry, Marcus, I'll be sitting in the back of your committee meetings in the next few months, so I will still attend. Thank you. In terms of shaping this actual budget, as you must realise, I've only been in the role a matter of weeks, so my actual work on said budget has been quite minimal. My focus is how we move forward past the budget. So the budget in itself brings stabilisation to this organisation, but at the same time, we need to focus on transformation, which is why a big part of the budget, there's a transformation programme in there. Also, clear financial tracking would be brought in at the same time as well. And also a key part moving forward is contract and procurement review, which I am heavily looking at this moment in time. But also a big part of where this council has quite frankly needed a bit more attention now versus previous times is income generation. So we need to look at how we can support this administration moving forward with enhanced income, which is why I'm working on an advanced paper on how we can work on bringing more revenue streams into this authority. And also at the same time, IT and AI play a significant part. So we are working on some significant projects at the moment with the lead up to LGR and how we can bring AI into this organisation at the same time. Thank you.
Nick, thank you. The reason I was whispering to Sam was because we were coincidentally talking about income generation and fees just a short while ago this morning. And I guess my question to you would be, would you be prepared to come to the next OSPB and have some kind of discourse about that? Now, one of the things we've said as board members is we want to be more actively involved in policy development, okay, rather than just marking the homework. We want to be more proactive than that. And there may be an option. I'm not going to ask you to commit now, but reflect on it. There's an invitation to come to our next board meeting, which is whenever it is, in March sometime. And perhaps just begin to share ideas. I think this is work that the board wants to do anyway, but it would be much better to do it with you rather than in parallel. Nick?
More than happy to work with everybody. I think the key thing is, you know, I'll reflect back on my first cabinet speech and also first full council speech. I made it very clear that my door is open to all councillors. And just to provide a brief update on where we're at that, quite a few councillors have actually, sent me a few emails. But there is a large proportion that a few haven't. Now, if we want to have a collaborative working environment, then I suggest that all councillors from the opposition who want to work with me email me in the next few days, because the door is open and I'm very happy to work with anybody. So the ball is in your court in that regard. Thank you.
Can I ask you to reflect on the invitation that we're giving you today to
yes.
ask you to reflect on that?
Do you want to mention the fees and charges?
So yeah, sorry, Roger's just whispering in my ear. I'm getting lots of people whispering in my ear this morning. Roger's reminding that we're talking about fees and charges potentially at our next meeting, so it would be great to have you along there.
Yes.
Thank you. Right, Marcus, anything else you want to ask? You're tempted, aren't you? Karen.
Thank you very much indeed. And my question actually is for Councillor Price again. And thank you for attending the Health Overview and Scrutiny, but you having gone has left 3 vacancies on HOSC now. So, but I did appreciate
There's
your
a common
attendance.
theme here, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, absolutely is, but thank you. My question's around PricewaterhouseCoopers and the £500,000 that's built into the budget. What are you looking for? How are you going to achieve it? And what's your time framework on that, please?
Bear with me one moment, I've actually prepared a response already.
You must be psychic.
I think you have to be with this job.
Okay, so 3 questions. You captured them all, Nick? Sure. If you want to have a look through there, I'll take another question and then come back to Karen, and you can answer it then, if you're still finding it. Okay. I'm going to... Karen, is there any other question you'd wish to ask?
No, I just,
Okay, we
as
await
colleagues
that
have said, we'll
response.
wait till tomorrow, but I would like to hear this response. Thank you.
Yeah, once he's got it, he'll give it to you. Seb, you're next coming down the line here.
Yeah, thank you. Much like my other colleagues, I'm sure I'll leave my full views on the 9% council tax rise to tomorrow. I think that's probably better for wider debate. But I suppose the challenge I have is the reassurance that this budget will actually then almost wipe the slate clean. I still think it's all very tribal and our collaborative nature is not coming through. Throughout the report, it talks about us all working together. I don't see that. I see a mandate from a minority-controlled administration telling us what it should be. And I don't remember, and I appreciate Councillor Price's comments that his doors are open, but so are ours. We have group meetings regularly that someone could pop along to and actually work with others. And I just think budget's great, but that relationship is not there. And I think how can we look at the future of Worcestershire when we can't even look each other in the eye? So more of a comment than a question.
That's a really good finish. When we can't look each other in the eye, how is it ever going to work? Rob?
Can I just come back on that, Seb? We have met with all parties, including your own party, but it's noticeable the different approaches from some parties compared to yours on working together, and I'll leave it at that.
Can I come back then Chair? Haven't met with me, haven't met with Councillor May, I don't know about Councillor Hart there. Just because we meet with group leaders does not mean that we meet with individuals. I'm more than happy to be flexible. It's already been shared in our meeting today that it's, you know, that some of us work. I'm happy to move work arrangements to meet with anyone at any point. I have had 3 cabinet members comment on my social media that they would never work with a Tory. So I don't know if that's perhaps fueling their inability to communicate. But I'm not having that you've met with a group leader and therefore all of us have met.
Rob?
I think, to be honest, Seb, that's the one you need to take up with your group leader. That was his suggestion. That's the way he wanted to do it. So you need to take that with your group leader.
More than happy to take it with Councillor Kent. He and I talk regularly, but again, my door's always open, as is my emails, as is my phone number. It's publicly available, and is Karen May's.
What I would suggest is, instead of people banging on people's doors, we actually create a culture and a framework, not just a culture, but a framework too, for looking again at our decision-making processes and reflecting the fact that we are in a minority administration circumstance. And that creates enormous pressures, not least at budget time. But it's all very well saying, you know, my door's already open. That's the kind of, forgive me, that's an easy response. The harder response is, what sort of culture do we want to engage here? Because I think there's a genuine commitment to try to do things better. And how we then reflect that in our political framework. Lots of people suddenly want to speak, which is great. Justin, no, let's go with Jo, because she's the leader, and then I'll come to Justin.
Thank you, Chair. We don't seem to have any problem with the other parties when we have arranged to speak or send that invite out to people and open our door. It just seems to be the one with yourselves, Seb. So I don't see what the problem is. I mean, but we're welcome to talk with you. And I don't know who's done that on social media too, but there's certain councillors in here that don't use social media. So I'd be open to discussing that with you too. Thank you.
And those who don't use social media are so much better off. I testify that. Justin.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just adding to Joe's point, really, which is that there is one party who, I'm afraid, through their actions and their approach over the last 9 months, has not put itself in a position where it's easy to work with them. We will work with anybody who is serious about tackling the problems this county faces. But I'm afraid when you've got some of the antics that have gone on, calling for the leaders to resign, cabinet members to resign, calling people liars, that is not how you do it. So it has to cut both ways. And I think we've demonstrated we are more than willing, and actually we want to, work with other parties to fix the problems that this council faces.
What I would say to you is the point I was making a moment ago. If the vision is collaborative working, we have to find a mechanism for delivering that, and it's more than just the door being open. We do need to look at our decision-making framework as it exists now, and perhaps reflect on a more collaborative approach. We are in very unusual circumstances in Worcestershire right now, and we're trying to get an engine that is not really fit for purpose to drive this machine forward. It's not going to get up that hill. So we need to, I'm drawing my analogy here, we need to probably have a root and branch review of our structures to make sure that they deliver a more collaborative outcome, rather than just beating with the leader once, or leader of the opposition once, or whatever. Karen's itching to say something.
Yeah, I am. I don't take any great joy when the leader of the ruling group's party refers to Worcestershire as a basket case. I find it totally offensive for the residents of Worcestershire, and I think they deserve better. So anything we can do to mitigate against that and to work together, I think, is most important.
There's an awful lot of political baggage circulating in the last month or two. I've seen some of the social media posts. None of it is helpful. And Mr. Farage, when he said that, was actually criticising his own group as much as anything else. Potentially. The basket case doesn't sit fairly and accurately, and it's a sad reflection on actually the hard work that's going on here and has been going on here. So let's just park that issue, though it's an example of what's getting in the way right now. I think we've done that point. Yeah, I'm just making sure Seb's happy. Natalie.
Yeah, I just want to speak on that point, and maybe I am in a lucky position that I have a really good relationship with both cabinet members that I work with on children and families. I think that there is a culture of collaboration and mutual respect there, and I don't know why that is, but there is. And I do often speak to Justin, and I always get a timely response if it's email. So I don't know what we're doing that is successful, but perhaps I don't know, but perhaps others could learn from that. I'm not an overly political person, I have to say. I'm here for the benefits of residents. And Justin and I have both worked in the field of supporting and protecting children and young people. So maybe it comes from that, but I don't know. But I just wanted to add the other side of the coin, that actually there are some good relationships in the council.
Those relationships are really important, but they are not in itself the solution to the problem. I would contend that we actually need to look radically at our policy making more generally, and that in itself would need to be cross-party. Karen.
Thank you very much. I wasn't in any way alluding to the fact that I have a bad relationship with either of the cabinet members. The cabinet member for adult social care has attended many meetings and is most helpful and contributes to the conversation and the discussion. A cabinet member for health and wellbeing is in the same essence. When work permits, she attends. It's not critical of that. What I'm concerned about is the fact that on the national screen was that Worcestershire is a basket case. I find that both offensive to our residents and offensive to the people that are sat around this table. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Chairman.
I think that point had been made, but you've reinforced it. Natalie, apart from the relations that you described, what
yes.
about the budget would you like to ask?
So, like others have said, really, I think I'm going to take the same stance and save my words mainly for tomorrow around the budget specifically. But I suppose particularly in terms of children and young people's, where a lot of our financial pinch points and pressures are, and you know, a lot of that is beyond our control. The Send White paper yesterday was welcome, but we've still got an issue, as was the government's announcement they'll pay off 90% of the high needs deficit. But that still leaves us with 10%. That I know we've been recommended to come up with a plan about how we are going to pay down that debt. And also the issue of home to school transport. I know we've made some savings there already, but that was kind of missing from the Send White paper as far as I could see generally anyway. So still some work to do there. So I suppose they're my main points really. How are we going to start to deal with the high needs deficit until the statutory override ends in 2028? Because we've still got 10% of what we owe already, plus anything that builds up between now and then, as far as I'm aware. And then the home to school transport issue obviously is a significant one for us too. So what are the significant plans to help us deal with that? Thank you.
Any response to that from anybody?
Chair, we need to come back to the point you made for Nick as well, but you've got a very good grip of that position. It is a real pressure that will still sit with us. We will have that 90% paid off, but 10% could be 40 million by the time we get there, and we will fundamentally have to make allowances within our reserves overall to be able to pay that back. We're not quite clear at the moment whether we have to pay it back straight away or whether we can pay it back over an extended period, in which case the amount we'd need to find would be significantly less if we only have to find the sort of contributing factor over, say, 20 years. But we don't know that yet. We're waiting to find that out. So more information to come. But the fundamental issue is that we will have to operate, much as we've proposed in the budget papers for tomorrow, which I know will lead to huge levels of debate. There are really only three things we can do. We either cut services to lower spend, we drive efficiency, which we're doing through the transformation plan, and we'll come back to that question that's being asked about driving efficiency, effectiveness, and overall cost to deliver services. And the third one is to raise your level of income. Now, as a county council, I think it's interesting that we are looking, as Nick is saying, to find new ways of bringing in income. They are quite limited for a county council. Having worked for a unitary and for a district, most of the services that drive income sit either in the district councils or ultimately are part of the overall envelope in a unitary. And it's quite a different situation when you come to a county. There's very little things that we do, things that create huge cost through demand, like adults and children's, but on the other side we don't have things like car parking income and various other things that many unitaries and districts do. So one of the answers to the question, and the timing is useful, is that it will be part of the LGR debate. And of course, as you move into LGR, there is a business plan that all members have seen. We are still waiting for the government's decision. But if you read that, you will see in there how this potentially creates the headroom in order to be able to put either more money into services or more money into reserves to pay back that debt. So there is a way through this, there is a way out of it. But if you look at the budget, just purely from an officer's point of view, tomorrow, we've looked at some level of savings, we've looked at some level of efficiency, and we've looked at some level of additional income, i.e. council tax. And so we've gone for a mixed model in this budget that's coming forward, and that balance will have to be struck at each budget as we move through, depending on the pressures that we face. And so there's no magic bullet answer. It is just a reality if that's what we'll need to do. But all of the plans and all of the precursors are in place to do that and will be delivered. But it will be a lot of work. It will be an awful lot of work, and it will be it will need to be quite radical. So the point you make about things, we have debated about digitisation of the council, we've talked about do we go to a digital front end, which many of private businesses have done, large private businesses. You can't go to a bank now and really see a person unless you make an appointment. Councils haven't done that, and I understand why we haven't done that, because we have a very different customer base, we have a very different provision of services that we're delivering. But actually, if you want to drive costs down, that's the way you go. And of course it's a compromise. You won't be able to see people, you won't necessarily be able to talk to people, but it will be cheaper. And that's the debate that members are going to have. Are we comfortable? Because the technology's there. We could put kiosks in the front of every building. We could do it online 24 hours a day. But it will mean that when you want to find that phone number to ring somebody up and ask some advice, they won't be there because you'll have made that as the cost saving. But all of these things are out there. The question is, what do we want Worcestershire to be? Because that you don't have to be fully digitised. But then, therefore, you can't expect to make the full costs of AI and digital reduction. You have to do one with it. If you're going to go and completely AI and completely front-end that to make the saving, then you can't also afford to have call centres and people available to meet people. So lots of work to do, and that's why it will take time, and that's why it will be over this next 2-year period as we move to LGR. And of course, other income generating services will come in and will give us a better base in which to operate from.
Nick, have you found your script?
I have, but I'll ask the Chief Executive to step in first, just to give a quick overview, if that's okay, of
Okay.
the transformation programme.
So I'll come back to you.
So the transformation programme, you've seen in there that there is a funding position, which I know is causing some concern, £500,000 cost. The initial position that we've done this on a position with the consultants to effectively mean that we will get 3 back for every 1 we spend. So a 3-to-1 ratio. So if we spend 500,000, we will expect at least £1.5 million worth of savings. And if you work that through going forward, that is a significant return on investment. I understand the argument of, well, shouldn't officers do this? And I would say absolutely. It's certainly something in my career that I've enjoyed doing in the past. But it does take time. And if they're going to do that, then they're not doing the day job. And we are very, very lean. We have cut out significant roles of management. We used to have a whole transformation department called Coach. It's gone. And effectively, if we want to do this work now, we either take it off services and don't do the services, or we buy it in as and when we need it, and that's the choice we've made. But we've made it on the basis that there will be a very clear return on investment, and there will be substantial changes made. So we'll do it in blocks, and we'll move that forward such that members can rightly scrutinise it, they can see where the money has come back. And the other thing that I think is very key in this particular case is in many times, and we hear about this a lot in children's services, is about making changes that prevent escalation of cost. They don't necessarily make savings. And the council has operated that way for a long time. So effectively, we'll put in this piece of work that effectively will mean our costs don't go up as quickly. That's fine if your budget balances. But ultimately for this council, even after this budget, you are still having a £60 million EFS. So there is still £60 million of work to do in terms of efficiency, effectiveness, cost reduction, work or income generation to balance the books. So you're absolutely right, this is not a one-off position. That's why transformation is the key. It's not going to be done by tinkering around the edges. It needs to be fundamental, a change in how we operate, a change in what we deliver, and also a focus on taking the cost out, not just using it to stop growth. Because otherwise you will always end up with a structural deficit within the budget. You have to take the money out. And that is a big step, and it will take time, and it will need very difficult policy decisions to deliver it.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Paul. So 3-to-1, £1.5 million. What part of the business are you going to look at? Because I've been around the block long enough that I was the cabinet member for Coach at one stage, and this 1-to-3 payback. I recall some other consultants that were brought in. We spent £600,000, and there was nothing from that actually benefited the council. So, what is the time framework on this? How are we going to monitor the outcomes? Because whilst I recognise that we need value for money, I also want to improve the outcomes for the residents, particularly around prevention. So, what's the initial focus of this, and how will you report back via our mechanisms to OSPB for the outcomes, please?
So we absolutely, and I've been around this block many times, it is very clear in this particular case that Phil Rook and the finance team will be accounting for the money that it comes back in. So it will come centrally, and it will be very clear that we can point to, we did this and this is where the saving is. We will not leave it within the service area for it to be consumed against any overspend or for it to be consumed against any growth ambition. You will be able to see it. So we will do that. We are going carefully, and we are going piece by piece, and we will start with effectively redesigning the corporate centre, because what we're effectively doing then is saying, ahead of LGR, what will LGR do we think will it look like? What could we do now as a county council to prepare us for that change? Because what you don't want to do is a change now and then change it again. You'll pay twice. So with that in mind, what are the structures, systems, so everything from IT, front door, CRM systems in terms of customer contact. You know, at the moment we have one in highways, we have one in adults, we have one in children's, we have one for the corporate centre, we'll have one. Now that sounds really easy, but it's massively difficult. And what used to happen is you used to do that through a call centre, and having done this and bear the scars for it, what you find is you put all of the people into the call centre, you cannot train a human being enough to know about everything about highways, everything about children's, everything about adults, and it takes time, and you get them up to a standard and then they leave, because call centre turnover is very high. AI changes that, because of course AI never leaves. So you can train AI to do that, and you can have that front end that will do it. And that's relatively new, and that will create a significant opportunity to drive down cost. So these are the sorts of practical things that we will do. We will report back after each stream of work. I'm more than happy to report to OSPB as well as to the administration. It's actually exciting. You know, a lot of this is difficult, and it will be testing and it'll be a lot of work, but actually I look at this as it's a chance in a lifetime to actually fundamentally think about all 7 councils either coming to 2 or to 1, and to have a real opportunity to have a fundamental change of what you do, including what are the outcomes that we want to deliver, what's the best way of delivering them, and fundamentally to that, what's the timeline. So we tend to operate in too short a timeline for local government. When you talk about prevention, you're talking about a 20-year sort of timeline. We always talk about 1 to 2 years, 3 years for an MTFP, it's minuscule, or we talk about 4 years in terms of a term for electing. We need to really set out those outcomes over a 20-year period. The only time we've done that in Worcestershire is in our economic plan, where we had a 20-year focus, and it's delivered. And so
our health agenda, our health and wellbeing agenda.
We have with health and wellbeing, but we're sort of on the way with that at the moment.
Yeah, but we did a 10-year plan, which...
We did. But we're part way through that. Whereas the economic development one we did quite a long time ago, so we can see the outcomes. So we know the method, we know how it works. We've just got to put that in across the piece.
One last question, if I may. The time framework on this, how long are PricewaterhouseCoopers coming in to do this piece of work, please?
Well, they'll be with us over a period of time. So they are going to see it through from both inception through to delivery. And ultimately, it will be in blocks of work as well, potentially. There may be other things that we want them to do as we move towards LGR. So ultimately, we are looking to have that. It's not just assistance to do it, it's actually to have the external push to challenges, because actually you have to accept we all live in a paradigm, don't we? We all live in a little world that is driven by what we've experienced, where we've come from, what we do. There are other things happening in local government across Britain, and what they bring to the table is, well, somebody else is doing this over here, why don't you do that? And it really helps us, in addition to what they're doing in other parts of the world, which is, it's very, very valuable in terms of the challenge to, and that's what I think we need in Worcestershire. We need that real challenge to us to say, I know you do it that way, but why? And yes, it works, and yes, it's always worked, but is there a better, cheaper, different way of doing it? We don't know all of the latest technology that's come out. PwC are much more on the button for that, because that is their core business. And so we are getting much more insight into what is possible, not just what we have heard about in a trade magazine, what really is possible.
Okay, I'm going to encourage people to ask brief questions and get brief responses. That way we can accommodate so many more people. Dan has indicated he wants to speak, but I'm going to go to finish the chairs first. Natalie. Well, I've asked... Is it about this point? Yes. Would you mind, Nat, if we let...
Sorry, I'll be really quickly. And it's in my register of interest, so it's not... But part of my day job is looking at implementation of AI in public sector. The challenge we face is, especially with LGR, when multiple councils become 1 or become 2, every council fights for their model and their database. I'm very reluctant or very worried that we're spending a lot of money to potentially go with other councils who may turn around and say, well, we want this one, and we eventually go with that. We can't get into a point that we're doing AI without engaging all the districts or all potential partners, that when LGR comes, we may all buy into this. Otherwise, we're chucking money down. And these conversations need to happen now rather than...
So we know in the summer whether we're 2 or 1, we can begin that work.
We're actually doing it now. Actually doing it now. We're meeting regularly. There are groups set up. Hannah Perrott is representing and driving it forward for the county council. And she's also called Hannah, but I can't remember her last name, who's from Bromsgrove and Redditch, who's doing a great job up there as well.
Corridor.
And we are effectively pulling together all of the data streams. We're pulling together all of the IT models. We're having that debate now, Seb, about, we might all be on Microsoft, but we're not all on the same version. So which version are we going to go for? And so that's what I'm talking about when we're doing the transformation plan. We choose the one that we have all agreed we're going to use. So whether it's 2 or it's 1, that's the way we're going. And we're putting all of that hard work into a central data room at the moment, and all of the districts are on board with that. So we're doing exactly what you're saying to try and stop that problem.
Natalie.
Yeah, thanks. Just an observational comment on the conversation that's just been had around the balance between cost avoidance and early intervention and prevention, which is a very difficult conversation to have, isn't it? It's difficult to evidence the zeros, I think is the phrase, which is where you try to show that you have saved money or saved service costs because you've intervened in a situation early. So that's a nuance that just needs, you're aware of that, but I just wanted to say that I'm also aware of it. But then specifically on the children and young people's question that I brought up, which feels like about an hour ago now, but we seem to be stuck between a rock and a hard place with it, because we're waiting for government's decisions on LGR, we're waiting for government's further information about SEND and homeschool transport, blah, blah, blah. So just to push that we're doing all that we can. I know Phil is involved in writing to the various departments at DFE, etc., and I'm involved from an LGA perspective. But just to continue to push for that information and that support, because we need it to inform our decision making. And whilst it's fine to talk about transformation plans, we still haven't seen a business plan, and I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but I need to balance those two against each other. So any timelines on the business plan, please, and the priority plan? Thanks.
I'll leave Justin to answer the last bit. In terms of the point about being a rock and a hard place, that's why we've chosen to start with the corporate centre, because actually we are waiting for things like what's the adult social care white paper, what's the children's, what's the change in terms of those areas. So we will sort out the things we are in control of at the moment, because we can get on with that now, and we're doing that, and we'll drive the savings there. But ultimately there will come a point where we will have done that, and we will then need to move into the service areas. We will probably go to E&I first, after that, if we're still not clear on children and adults. But of course, if it does become clearer, we will go to those areas as soon as it's clear, to make sure we can embed these particular systems. But they are going to be involved in the corporate choice, and that's the key. That's fundamental, and the team are fully on board. In fact, they went to PwC for a full AI introduction last Thursday in Birmingham to bring them all up to speed, and everybody came back really quite buzzing about that. So that's the first thing, hearts and minds of strategic directors, to really want to drive this fundamental transformation, and we're starting, we're getting on with it, but we're doing the things we can control first, and then as things become clearer, and it's a relief to me to at least the SEND paper has come out, and we will keep pushing. Phil is very keen and pushing very hard, as is Adam, and we'll continue to do that through CNN and through our MPs and various other areas wherever we can. But any members that can push through their groups, through their national lobbying, would be very, very welcome.
Okay. I'm going to aim to finish this section at 12:30, if that will help focus people's minds in terms of the questions and the answers. Nat, would you mind if...
Second part of the question, sorry. About the priority plan, sorry.
Justin.
In terms of children and families, I can certainly answer that. We've got a business plan completed. So we've just been a little bit busy with something else this week. It escapes me at the moment, but as soon as that's out of the way, I'll be in touch and looking to actually probably bring it to scrutiny panel there. And Nick, if he may want to tell you about the overarching plan which sits above that.
Go outside and complete the meeting in the beautiful spring sunshine. Natty, you're done.
I think Nick was going to come back on the overall priority
Nick.
plan rather than just children and families. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So as soon as I became a cabinet member, I've been working across the portfolio holders, formulating those plans so we can put something down on paper. So we have internal steering groups on those. Beginning of March, will be the key indicator point where we'll pull everything together. So it is coming. We can try and, I don't want to put any timelines on it because it is a big piece of work, but I'll keep you updated on the progress of that.
Thank you, Nick. I'm going to, Mel and Richard have been waiting a long time. Very patiently. Mel.
Chair, thank you. I think with the backdrop of, obviously, Reform UK's national commitment to lower taxation, and we're looking at an increase of 8.98%, obviously this will affect a lot of households. We have a cost of living crisis, and particularly households that are on fixed income. I would like to know what mitigation is in place for those households.
Just add to that, have we factored in the inability to pay it and the reduction in the... Sorry, Richard, I was stalling your question. The inability necessarily of obtaining all the increase because it's a district function, and how buoyant that tax base may be, and how many people might just frankly go into debt and not pay it. Have we factored that into our financial equation?
Well, as you said, Tom, it's a district council function to collect it. Whether they've factored it into their calculations, I can't commit to that. And in terms of Mel's question, again, any help or assistance with paying the bills needs to be going through the district council. But I can say hand on heart, this has not been an easy decision. This is not one we want to make. We really do not want to make it. And we fully recognise that, you know, it's £2.79 a week, sounds nothing. That's £12 a month. I know people that will hurt. So it is with a heavy heart we're doing it.
Mel, the floor's still yours.
Chair, thank you. I guess more of a follow-up, bearing in mind we haven't quite seen, other than hiring consultants to do transformation for us, what plans do we have in future to ensure this doesn't happen again next year?
It's your portfolio.
Well, the transformation plans are key to this not being in this position. That's our way through. As well as local government reorganisation, the transformational plans are key to ensure we don't end up in this position next year. And I can't say any more than that. That has to deliver. If that doesn't deliver for us, then we're in trouble.
Can I take this opportunity to ask one of my questions, which is related? There's a lot of conversations about difficult decisions. Could you give me an example of a difficult decision you've made in this budget that impacts on people in a way that you'd rather not? So we've done 9 million, no, forgetting, I'm talking about savings, not income here. What saving measure have we put in place that has been a difficult decision so far? While you're talking about it, could I suggest that the fact that you haven't been able to give me an immediate response suggests that actually so far we haven't really got into any difficult decisions about savings? And if that is not the case, could you give me an example?
Sorry, Paul, that just reminded me. And the reason I couldn't think of it because it didn't actually come through as a saving. Some of the areas we wanted to put on the savings list, we discussed with the groups, and it was a red line for them that they had to be kept in. So for the car parking charges at Wild would be one. Divisional funding, highways funding for members, all suggestions for savings that we listen to the groups as we have to as a minority administration. So that's the reason I couldn't think of a saving. It was a difficult decision because they didn't go through into the savings, but again, difficult decision.
I'm sorry, you've misunderstood my question. I'm trying to understand, we talk a lot about difficult decisions. This budget, this financial crisis is going to involve difficult decisions. But so far, I can't identify a difficult decision that's going to impact on residents that we have made. I understand that there's been a little bit of work with the group leaders, But no, give me an example of a saving we've made that was a difficult saving to deliver, which were difficult in terms of the impact on residents. Or is all that still to come?
I think I'm not really fully understanding that the whole issue is we haven't made the difficult savings that are going to impact negatively on residents.
That is the answer I was expecting you to say. So my follow-up would be, so we haven't made any difficult decisions yet. We have a situation where we're borrowing circa 60, potentially as an overdraft, 60 mil. We're not going to get to a balanced budget, are we, until we identify those difficult saving decisions. They don't seem to be incorporated in next year's budget. So what are they going to look like and when are they going to be on the table?
Well, they'll be on the table during the budget preparation starting September, October next year. That's when, obviously discussions will be going on prior to that, but that's when they'll start coming through onto the table.
Richard?
I would have thought the 2.5 million saving in highway maintenance might have been a difficult decision, but that's something which for you to consider. My actual question, was just partially asked by Mal next door to me. The main budget proposal, which is of urgent concern, is the 8.9% council tax increase and the impact that will have on individuals, especially people who are least able to afford that kind of increase. Now, it could be argued, and I think I would argue, that it would have been easier to do this over a longer period in time and not have reductions in council tax increases over the last 10, 15 years. And the consequences of that doing that means there's a huge increase now, which is more difficult for the individuals to meet. But the issue which I have is the ability to pay for a large number of the residents I represent who are on low or fixed incomes. You say, in response to Mal's question, that it's a responsibility for district councils in collection, which I accept, but we also have a responsibility to support and help residents through social care with advice and support and assistance with making welfare claims and benefit claims for things like council tax benefit, universal credit and pension credit. What increase and extra understanding will be made in the processes which we go forward to support those residents who are most unlikely the residents to make claims, to actually encourage them to make claims for benefits? And what kind of service provision are we going to identify to assist those residents to claim the benefits which they're entitled to make?
So the answer was partly already given, that it's a district council function, but Rob, please, if there's anything else you'd like to add.
I mean, there are district council budgets specifically for all this, for welfare, for help and assistance. And as someone who's actually previously worked in housing associations also have budgets for their tenants to enable them to make sure they're claiming all the benefits they're entitled to. So there is plenty of financial resource out there to ensure that people, members of the public who are struggling, get the help and advice they need.
If I may, Chair, we also give grants to citizen advice bureaus and welfare rights centres across the county as a county council, and those grants have reduced consistently over the last few years. So I'm seeking information to make sure that any future grants to citizen advice bureaus and any support which we can provide within our social care perimeters can also be used to help residents in most need to claim the benefits which they want, which they need. We can use our facilities and resources which we have available to us already to actually help residents. Simply dismissing it and saying it's not our responsibility is wrong. We have responsibility for our actions.
That was a statement on the question, but nevertheless, let's see if we've got an answer. Yeah.
No, citizen advice bureaus, Citizen Advice Bureau grants,
okay,
support with social care systems.
Okay. So the question is the County Council considering offering resource and support for those advisories and those advocate bodies like Citizens Advice to support residents? My understanding, from a district council point of view, is that Malvern Hills, at least, is the one I know, is quite rigorous in chasing debt. In terms of council tax, it's pretty brutal, to be honest. You know, the letter comes and it's almost like a court case straight away. And I do share with Richard some of the issues about some people finding £150 plus a year more will be something that is for some people, a real issue. And I guess, whilst I'm just saying, well, that's an issue for the districts, and it is largely, we need to consider the implications of any significant step change in council tax, the sort of thing we're proposing tomorrow. I don't think there's anything else you want to say to that. And Rob, Nick wants to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to highlight that this authority also contributes to district councils of 0.5 million with a hardship fund, which can be used in situations like Councillor Oodle's describing. We also work with the district councils to understand if that is sufficient. So if they feel it's not, then they have a responsibility to communicate back to us on that regard. I think also we also signpost, especially for those in adult social care at the same time. So there is measures that this council does do to help residents. Thank you.
Richard, anything else?
I think I'm wasting my time, but yeah.
Well, you're not wasting your time. You ask a very good question. Josh is next.
Thank you, Chair. And I've got a few questions, and I won't save my questions till tomorrow. I'll ask them now. And as someone, when I was a child, who remembered the council tax bills coming through with the red things on them and the bailiffs knocking on the door, I don't take this lightly at all, and I can understand what people will be going through. So on that point, straight away, I want to ask a question about council tax. The legal limit is 8.99% before you have to go to a referendum. By putting it to 8.98%, you're saving a Bandy resident 16p a year. Now, you've all told us that this is really serious and you need to maximise the amount of money coming to this council. So I can ask you clearly now why you've chose 8.98%. Is that in the benefit of residents of this county, or is it a line for your National Party to be able to say that you haven't put it up the most of the country?
Okay, Rob?
It is a token gesture, as you say. It's a token gesture that's been taken on a local level, just as trying to show people that we're not taking absolutely everything we can. And it's also, there's a second reason for this, is to dispel the myth that is grown up from I don't know where, that officers are running the council. The Section 151 officer was very clear on his advice. You need to go for 8.99%. He was very, very clear on that. We've gone against that advice, and it's a way of proving that we are running this council, we as in members, not the officers.
I think it's collaboration I prefer to see rather than one or other. Could you remind me, Rob, what that differential brings in? We heard 16 pence. What is it in aggregate? In other words, if we'd gone to the extreme rather than this, what's the gap?
It's £36,000.
£36,000. Okay, that's the difference between the two. Thank you. Justin's been wanting to speak for ages, and I keep looking elsewhere. Is there anything else?
I had more to do, but
You said you wanted to ask your questions tomorrow, which is why. But
no, I didn't. I said the complete opposite. But Justin has had his hand up for a while.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Chair. It's just on the point, and actually ties in a little bit with how Josh started there, which is about vulnerable families where children are involved. As you'll know, social care reform is going through, and we've been putting through a big transformation of the prevention service. And actually, as part of that, helping families in trouble, and financially as part of that, is part of the support that we will be offering. And so, you know, in terms of vulnerable families, they will absolutely be getting input and support where financially, you know, this has an impact. So although it's not a direct result or a direct extra that we're putting in as a result of the council tax rise, there will be support in place for those vulnerable families.
Thank you. Josh, I'm happy to come back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So I say I've got a few questions, but on that 16p, and it's being called as a token gesture, for that token gesture, I'm really struggling to see what I could get. I've gone around the shops and I think I can get a banana or a lollipop. That token gesture is absolute nonsense. If you are sitting there and saying that you could reduce the council tax lower than what officers are telling you to do, you either can or you don't bother. It definitely feels like someone can stand there at National and say that the Reform UK are not putting it up by the most. But to carry on things, you say £500,000 to be spent for 3 times the amount of money, so that's £1.5 million. I presume that's recurring. thingy, but we're £60 million potentially in the red this year. And again, I've seen absolutely no plan come forward about how we address that. We all talk about transformation, and then we talk about digitalisation, something I'll be absolutely against. I spoke to, I was talking to residents last night, 85 people crammed into a room, and one of their things, we're talking about a planning application, and one of their things they were talking about is how they find it really difficult to get online to be able to do it. So can you, whether it's the Chief Executive or the leadership, Reform leadership, tell me what are your plans to address that 60 million next year? Because if we're back here next year, then what is the point of the thing? You've had 9 months to come up with some sort of plan to be able to do something, and there's absolutely nothing in here. And when someone's asked what's the hardest thing you've done, you couldn't even name £2.5 million out of the highways budget. You couldn't name any of the capital stuff that you all said was vitally important that we had to do to get rid of it. You didn't think that was the hardest thing. So what is it going to be? When are we going to have a plan? And how are you going to address the up to £60 million deficit that you're going to have this year, so we're not in this situation next year?
Rob first.
The £59 million borrowing for next year, plus the £33 million that we borrowed for this year for EFS, is not going to be resolved overnight. It's going to be a long-term plan, and local government reorganisation is part of that longer-term plan. It's not going to be resolved in the next 12 months. And to criticise us for not having plans, we've been in power for 9 months. We've been in power for 9 months as a minority administration. Every single day, we have to negotiate, collaborate, talk with others. We can't do everything we want to do. That is a difficulty which I don't think you fully understand, and to be quite honest, you probably never will fully understand. This is a culmination of years and years of financial mismanagement, and to expect us to resolve it in 9 months is ridiculous, to be honest with you.
I'm sure, Rob, you'd want to reflect on what you just said to Josh about you'll never understand. I think that's an unhelpful comment, I'll be honest.
In which case, I do apologise for that. He wasn't meant, I'm not a nasty person, as I hope you realise I know, and it was said in passion, and I apologise for it.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really helpful. But I think the point is well made, and I think it's one that's resonating in the last half hour about, yes, you've actually, the budget you inherited was not of your creation. It was a budget that was constructed last February. This budget, on the other hand, is certainly something you'll be proposing tomorrow. And I think the question is, and it was one I was trying to allude to in the difficult decisions, are we in danger of kicking this can down the road and hoping local government review, reorganisation will save us from the abyss? Or are we now getting to grips with those, quote, difficult decisions and having an honest debate about them? Or are we just hoping local government reform will come along and save us all? Rob, there's a question in there, I'm sure, somewhere you may want to respond to.
I mean, we are now getting on top of things after, say, just 9 months. We have inherited a difficult position, and we're fully aware that from tomorrow, it's our gig. We fully understand that. So we can't sit there blaming the previous administration after tomorrow. We understand that. But nevertheless, the problems are long-term, and it won't be resolved in this budget year, budget round, probably the budget round after, or the budget round after. But there is a long-term plan through transformation and through local government reform to get on top of the finances and get Worcestershire County Council back to a financially resilient position.
Thanks, Rob. Justin caught my eye first, Paul, then I'll come to you. Justin?
I'm just going to build on in more detail what Rob's just said, because you have to understand why we are in this mess. And I'm going to talk about children's services, and I've talked about it a lot. But the amount of money we spend sending children to the care of private companies as a result of decisions that were made previously, I'm not going to get into that bit. I'm going to talk about the solutions. But it's over £60 million. So this is the important bit. To change that, you actually have to get underneath the problem and fix it. So, you know, we brought in the fostering changes, complete restructure of the service. That's already increased our in-house capacity by 15%. That's 15% more children that we won't have to send out to private companies because we will be caring for them ourselves. So This year, with still 1 month to go, we've already got a statutory cost avoidance amount of nearly £12 million. That's 33% more than the whole of last year. This is all because of changes we are making structurally. You have to get underneath the problem. So you do it service by service, directorate by directorate, and we're already doing that. Incidentally, the changes that we brought in fostering, they cost about £250,000. They've already more than paid for themselves in just a few months. That's how you fix it long term. So, you know, we're already doing it, but the next key is doing it across the council, and that's where the wider transformational work will kick in.
Okay. Josh, then Seb.
So just to come back, and I appreciate the apology, Councillor Walton. I've been called a lot worse in this chamber by other councillors and never got an apology. So thank you.
I'm sorry for anything I've said.
So to get this correct, and you know, you've heard in this chamber and a lot of us, and that I have not been a fan of the previous administration either, and they know that as well. But that you're saying this doesn't get fixed over this year. So are you planning next year to ask again for EFS or a council tax increase? Are you asking for that for the following year as well? Because you're saying you can't fix it in 1 year. So how do you square that circle next year?
Rob?
The quick answer to your question is no, we don't have any plans to ask for EFS or a council tax increase next year currently.
Okay,
but obviously, unless I've used the word currently, and you know why, that is the case as at today. Currently, we have no plans to do that. The budget process will kickstart in September, October time, and then we'll have a clearer position of where we are and what we need the following year.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, just to clarify, we've got £60 million of deficit up to this year. We have no plan to be able to do it, and we think we can't do that in 1 year. So you've got to have plans to increase it by more than 5% or EFS. You might say currently not. You either got a plan to eliminate that £60 million, or you've got plans to increase the revenue or the credit card limit. It's either or. And I'd love, you know, your party's been accused of not being 100% honest at the election about cutting waste and cutting taxes. So let's try and set that out now, so we don't have this problem in 12 months' time, that we come back again and say, well, you've done it again. So we need to be an open and honest answer about on how you're going to bridge that gap.
Paul has been keen to get in. Justin, forgive me, I will come to you, and I will come back to Rob. So Paul first, then Justin, then Rob.
I just think it's important to be apolitical on this, but and try and thread a very dangerous line for me here. There will be in that interim period a fiscal event. Effectively, the government will announce what it's going to give to local government. So everything at the moment is not fixed. We are required by law to set a 1-year budget, which is what we do. And so to expect, we have a 3-year MTFP, so you can see it. If you go and read the MTFP, you can see what the plan is. So your answer is in the MTFP. But if you combine this budget with the transformation plan and the LGR business plan, you will see a very clear direction of travel of how we come out of this current cycle. And if you look at the history of it, last year we effectively, as a council, had a £34 million EFS and £15 million worth of reserves. So the total amount was about 49 million. This year, we would have had a council tax, a EFS rate of £74 million if we didn't have the increases in income and the savings that we've got. So what effectively you can see is the graph was going up like that and it's levelling. And then when you look at the plans for the future, you will see it come back down to that position. In those interim years, though, there are fiscal events from government where the government could give us additional funding. And we've just seen it for Cent. We've just seen it for other things. And actually, the one thing that I think is changing, and I've waited a long time for it, is I think there is a general acceptance that the funding of children's and adult social care has to be reviewed and sorted out. Now, we've seen the tip of the iceberg with SEND, and that's on a national level, not on a local level. I think most people accept that it's not sustainable long term, and that's the point you're making, that ultimately that's where the money and the deficit has come from, and that's what we'll need to change in order to bring that deficit down. And we don't know exactly what those changes are yet, so we can't plan exactly what that delivery will be, but you can see what the trend is. It's going up, it's flatlining, and then if you look at the LGR stuff, it will come down. That's our plan at the moment, irrespective of politics at the moment. Now, clearly, you can change the level of those lines depending if you make additional decisions. And that's the point I think that the chair is making about where are those decisions. You could change the level of that line, but the line is there. You can see it. It's stabilising and then coming down. But it is obviously, it could go down much steeper if the government give us more money. It won't go down at all if they give us less money. And so it's just a bit early yet to be able to project exactly where that will be.
Okay. I'm going to give advance notice that I'm closing this list now, and the people still to speak are Justin and Rob and Richard and Roger. He's just got in there in the nick of time. Seb and Dan, in no particular order, but you are the remaining speakers. I'm going to ask you to be quite brief with your question, and briefer still with the answer, because I'm going to fail miserably to get my 12:30 anywhere near it. So the next person on my list is Justin, I think. Justin.
It's just to say, you know that children's is one of the big pressures, and there are no guarantees. But we're tackling the demand prevention with the prevention work. We're tackling how we deal with those children when they come in through the transformation that we're doing and the restructuring, etc. There is the third factor, which has been talked about, which is the government's role. But there are no guarantees. We have to trust the process. And in 6 months' time, we'll have a much better idea. And that's probably the time when you can reasonably ask, where are we? Because it does take time. So I think it's quite reasonable for us to say, we're making the changes, it's happening, it needs time to bed in, and in 6 months' time, we'll be able to give you a much clearer answer in terms of how that's going. And I think that's a very reasonable position to take.
I beg to because what I'm saying is that as of today, you can't tell me where the cuts are going to happen or whether the following year, whether you're going to ask for EFS or council tax. I want people to be frank and open and honest about those decisions. So you either tell me where that £60 million cuts are going to come from, or tell me now that you're going to be asking for EFS or above 4.99% council tax. It's one or the other. So you haven't given me the £60 million, so I presume you're going to be asking again next year for more than 4.99%. So where is it?
No, you can't presume either way. What I'm saying to you is the work's going on to fix the problem, and that's an entirely reasonable thing to do. You can't say it's definitely going to be that or it's definitely going to be that, because it takes time to see how things work. I've transformed services over many years. It takes time, and you cannot guarantee outcome. I'm sorry. So that is how it is. So no, I can't answer you. Okay?
Okay, Rob is next.
Yes, so I just want a point of clarification. We've got no plans to ask for council tax flexibility next year. As part of the application for this year's EFS, there was a tentative application put in for 27-28 for the EFS part, but the council tax side, no, we have none. And as you just heard the Chief Executive say, this is a course of a matter of 3 to 5 years. We're not going to be making £60 million of cuts next year to balance everything. But Josh, that's 12 months away. There's lots can happen in that 12 months. We've got a budget to go through.
You just told me 9 months isn't long enough, so what is it?
I'm sorry.
I think your point is well made, Josh. I think it's resonated around the room, but I don't think there's any further answer that's required. I think you've got as much as you can get out of Rob and Justin and Paul, but I think your points are well made, and I think they remain there in everybody's thinking about sustainable budgets going forward and creating a situation where we come from the cliff edge into a more, more reasonable times in terms of working with a sustained budget. Right, I have got on my list the next person, Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've been on OSPB, I think, for over 10 years now, and one thing which has frustrated me throughout the whole of that process is whoever's in the administration believes that budget scrutiny lasts between December and January. And I think that is a complete failure on the process on part of both scrutiny and on part of any administration. I believe, and I'm asking you whether you would actually support this, is that budget scrutiny should start from the 1st of April this year, and that we should have regular discussions such as this, looking at spending, looking at savings, looking at proposals for the budget, so we can work together in a council where there is no overall control on building a budget together rather than building a budget purely on one political standpoint or view. It's about working with scrutiny to establish a budget in advance, so we don't just have this process where we're responding to an announcements within 1 month of them being made. Through budget scrutiny throughout the whole of the year. Is that something you can agree to?
I can't agree to doing it from the 1st of April because the budget formulation plans fundamentally don't start at that point. But as you're right, as a minority administration, we will continue to speak with other groups, and we started that process, I think, at the back end of November. It was a point one councillor made in, it may have been you actually, Tom, actually, in council about having to work together, and we took that on board, and we will certainly start that process early this year. Whether it will be from the 1st of April, I know I can't commit to that. And I would point out as well that full council and scrutiny committees do get regular financial monitoring reports throughout the course of the year. So you know what we're spending, you know where the savings are coming, so you do already get that information.
So that's absolutely right. There's a world of difference between monitoring current expenditure for the previous quartile than actually looking ahead, which I think was what Richard's asking for. So it's something new. This is not routine quarterly monitoring that currently takes place, which is very helpful and probably could be utilised more than we actually do. But in terms of a collaborative, cross-party work, I'm still looking forward to hearing the difficult decisions. Seb.
Thank you. Yeah, and maybe it's a question for the leader, if I may, Chair. And I do have to praise Councillor Bowen's work on children's. He regularly reports back, and I think, you know, if these savings have been made, that is phenomenal, and it's a tough area, and I do want to put on record how great that is. What I'm confused about is we have cabinet members to look after directorates, so whilst Councillor Bowen has grabbed, you know, the bull by the horn almost and run with it, we're not seeing these savings across every directorate. So perhaps what direction are we getting? That it's not directorate at a time, but everyone could lead by the example of Councillor Bowen and actually just run at full pace. I mean, I wasn't in the last administration, so I can't be blamed for anything, but I do think, and I put that on record, and I know Councillor Bowen did point out I was watching television at the time, so, but I'm here now. But I'm really, really keen to find out from the leader what direction are each cabinet member actually taking ownership of their directorate, like Councillor Bowen did.
Okay, so we've got an exemplar. Justin, you're being praised everywhere this morning. And everybody, the thing is, if everyone was Justin, we'd be, is that what you're saying? Okay, Joe.
Thank you. Okay, let's answer this one. It's a bit of a mishmash, I think, with some of the questions you've stated and the hint about last administration. I can cover that one in a moment. I'll come back to that one. This is why I've introduced Nick to come and scrutinise each cabinet role, because I did have somebody on board last time, but I didn't actually get the work that I wanted. But Nick has been intensifying, looking at everything, all of the cabinet roles. So you will have some answers soon on that. So that is what we're doing on that. Going back to the previous administration, how much detail would you like? Lots? Okay. So when you're a backbencher, as you probably know, but you're a chair, so you know everything, don't you? You have an input on everything, apparently. That's what I've been told previously. So you come to scrutiny meetings like this? Yeah? Okay. I'm just answering his questions. He mentioned about about being a backbencher. I'll be very quick. I'll just sum it up now quickly. Okay. So if you want me to, I can actually answer that in depth tomorrow. If you ask me that question again, that would be brilliant. Okay, thank you.
That's okay. So with bated breath, we're looking forward to that tomorrow, Joe. I've got two more.
Sorry, Tom, can I just ask, is that therefore approval for an urgent question to be granted? Because I won't be giving up my 2 minutes to discuss the budget to ask that question.
You'll need
so
to
maybe if the monitoring officer could
she's
confirm.
not in the room right now, but test it out with Hazel, and she'll tell you whether it's okay.
Or the chief exec, maybe? Could he answer that one?
No, let's leave the monitoring officer to do the monitoring officer's job. Two people left. Dan, please, and then I'll go to Roger.
Thank you, Chair. Although I have had to hold everything back because I've been making a list, as I did wave once and then never got kind of looked at. Just to say, with regard to the concept of policy forming at scrutiny panels, absolutely not against this as a concept, but I just want to go back to that point of if we really want to keep the tribal behaviour out of what is happening in scrutiny and we want to start talking about policy, that policy is a political discussion, which means I'm absolutely fine with that going into that room, but that then means we're not necessarily scrutinising the decision making of the council. So it's one of those where if that is where we want to head, I think we do need to start thinking about how that operates, because I will defend anything the Lib Dems bring forward, both nationally, most of the time, and locally, all the time, with full force. So I think this is one where we need to understand that that will change scrutiny, and I won't hold back. Just on that one, I obviously couldn't attend Cabinet yesterday, I did watch it. I think the idea of amendments coming to scrutiny is an interesting one, because again, that will bring a political element to it. Because again, I more than happily will bring amendments to any council where I believe there is something that will benefit my residents. And again, I will wholeheartedly support them, especially when they're cost neutral and people lie. But what I do want to just ask, and this is more for the officers, because I really want this understood, because obviously I've had a lot of conversations behind closed scenes, because obviously my group have told me this is what we would like to achieve this year, this is what we want to go to do. So Phil and Steph and Paul have had to spend a ridiculous amount of time with me as I start asking kind of huge questions about what we can do with the budget. So one of the things that's been floated to me by another political group is that all opposition councillors vote against the budget, and the leaders then end up going into some sort of negotiating period where we then have to start talking about what else we can do instead. I just want the officers just to give a bit of a kind of overview of what would happen here, because I think it's very clear that they've given up on their 5%, but they obviously want somewhere between 9% and 5%. What exactly have we got to do if we are starting to look at 6, 7, 8% when we've only got a week to actually make that decision? What decisions can we really make in that time, given that we will have to start cutting 3.6 million per percentage? Because if I'm going into those negotiations, I want to know what it is I'm going into, and what I want residents to know what it is I'd be faced with that.
Interesting question. We're in unknown territory at that point, but I think there is a fairly clear way through it. Members have all had the information. They all know their responsibilities. There is a responsibility on members to set a legal budget and to exercise sound thinking and decision making in terms of coming to their conclusions. So I won't rehearse that. If tomorrow there is a position where the budget is voted down, then there is a couple of options. One is you could have an adjournment if the chair chose to do that, if the chairman chose to do that, where there could be some conversations. That would be only if there were very minor positions. Otherwise, and members will be aware, there is a reserve date a week later. We have to set the budget legally by the 11th of March. If we don't do that and we end up at stalemate, then effectively, I think what the first thing would happen, more than likely, is that firstly we would inform government that we were unable to set a budget. I suspect the auditors, our external auditors, who we've kept aware of the budget position all the way through, would form an opinion on what they thought about the governance and the decision making and the position the council finds itself in. They have a number of things that they can do. They could order a public interest report. They could potentially talk to government, and ultimately government could look at intervention to set the budget. So we don't know exactly what would happen, but the chances are something from our external quality assurance sort of governance position would happen to us. In that interim week, if we had a position, I think there would be a point where it would be for the administration to consider the budget they'd put forward and whether or not they wish to make any changes. They could choose to make changes, they could choose not to make changes. There would also be the opportunity to talk with all of the other leader groups, and whether or not they could get agreement might lead to some amendments that could do that, and there would be a cabinet meeting for them urgently put forward. Cabinet would then recommend that to council, and there would be the council meeting the following Friday. The difficulty with that is that it would completely disrupt all of the council bill printing and being sent out. We've got an initial figure of £700,000. We think it's probably more likely to be $1 million plus by the time all of the costs have come in from the district councils, plus the fact that you'd have to reissue bills, and we would have to repay those costs to our district colleagues, quite rightly so, because it's our default. And again, I think we would face that form of some form of challenge by our external auditors and ultimately MHCLG. In the end, a budget will be set, but it's whether or not we set it or the government set it. You know, it's not a good thing to do. I remember when I was a child, I still remember it now, of the sort of Liverpool days, and I'm sure most people still think of Liverpool as a difficult area politically for setting budgets. I would absolutely urge that we do not want Worcestershire to be in that cohort of councils that has a national presence for difficult areas of governance and position. It's a very difficult list to get back off. The reputational damage is very, very high. There is a way forward here. I know it's difficult. You talked about difficult decisions. This is one. 9.8% council tax, 8.98% council tax is a very difficult decision. And I know it's very difficult for all members, irrespective of party. But that's where we are at the present time. That's the proposal that's been put forward. It is a potentially very difficult decision. But there will be significant consequences if we don't set it.
I think the message is clear. Also, in terms of reputational management, basket cases isn't helpful. Dan?
So just to clarify, obviously we had the letter from, I hate acronyms, MHCLG, I think I've got that in the right order, stating that we've got the 59.9 million loan, because that's basically what it is, it's a loan, and that basically it clearly states we need to take all reasonable steps to manage financial pressures, and external assurance review will include looking at the governance. So if we were to then turn around and say, right, we're going to try and get this down to 4.99%, having read all that, is there the risk that then they say, well, actually, you don't need all of that loan then? Or is that loan fixed and locked in if we start going around and say, well, actually, we'll look at this 5.99, we'll look at 6.99. Can they actually come back and say, well, actually, your external auditors here are going to say that this is just not balancing at all, and actually what you're now doing is just becoming quite reckless, actually?
I think there's a real danger of that, but of course it all depends on what the actual suggestion is. You're absolutely right in that for every percentage you take off, you will be taking 3.6 million. So if you were to take you'd be talking about 14.4 million if you wanted to get down to 4.99. 14.4 million is more than the savings that have currently been identified. It is significantly more than all of the things that have been rejected at council. And so we are talking about major things which ultimately are likely to have additional costs with them. So, you know, significant cost reductions often also have an upfront cost. And they also have a time lag, which would mean the time lag means you can't get the entire amount of money out in the year, which means you have to have a bigger total in order to do it. So you get into a very, very difficult place to be able to make that add up. which is why the budget takes so long to put together. It is, you're absolutely right. I think it's very difficult to think of what are the things that we could do that would pass muster and people would look at and say, yeah, that's a well thought out plan where all the costs are truly put in place, any contingent liabilities are significantly pointed out, and you're going to do that in 2 to 3 days when we haven't been able to establish those in 5 months. I think it is a very big ask.
Okay, interesting. Dan, one more question from you?
So just a tiny one. Obviously, I take everything that goes into my inbox very seriously. And Hazel, I'm sorry, this is one for you. The legal responsibilities and budget setting. Under 7.2, there is a sentence that says, the indemnity cover provided to members by the council does not include actions that constitute an offence or are reckless. My real question is, where do I report what I would consider to be reckless behaviour?
What a question. Yes, I think it would be to me or the Chief Executive, but potentially also to audit, which could include internal audit or external audit.
So you may want to have a conversation outside this meeting to develop that thought process. Right, my Vice Chair is... I'm going to... Actually, in fairness to Dave, he sat here for the best part of 3 hours. If there's something you want to say or ask, Dave, I'm going to come to you, but I'll go to Rog first.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've had a very good meeting today. It's been frank and honest, and there's some very difficult questions been asked by everybody and some very difficult answers given. I won't go over old ground of where we've come from, because that would be like resurrecting the problems that we've had. I think I'd just like to remind everybody that, as the Chief Executive says, we have a 59.933 million overdraft. That overdraft has to be paid back at some point in time. I think the administration is trying to deal with that. Nobody would want an 8.98% council tax rise. I certainly don't, and I know our residents don't, and I think everybody in this room doesn't want it. But that's where we are, and we have to face reality. And tomorrow, obviously, there will be a budget presented to everybody. And I think the Chief Executive has outlined the problems that if we don't agree that budget. And I think it's just a reminder for everybody to understand the position we're in and where we're going forward. I don't want to ask a question, but I'd just like to summarise on that point. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. And as you say, it doesn't need an answer, but there's some points well made. Now, Jen and Dave have sat here so patiently for the best part of 3 hours, and I'm going to say something controversial here. I think it looks like we've got a front row and a back row, clearly we have. I'm just wondering whether we might want to consider the choreography of the room to put the chairs and the vice chairs together rather than a back row and a front row. Because I do feel as though you're kind of semi-detached just because of the geography. Jenny? Yeah.
There's definite a detachment. We had a councillor leave earlier in this meeting because he couldn't get his point across. He asked repeatedly earlier on and didn't get his say and felt like his time was being wasted. So we've got to do something. Thank you.
It's literally quite difficult to engage with you because there are people in the way. It's literally... it's quite hard. Dave, anything you'd like to say?
Dieu est mon droit. We've got on my right, really. I just echo, really, what Roger said, Roger Bennett. I sit here, and this is not a political discussion for me at all. We're between a rock and a hard place. We've all got our certain way of looking at this. But tomorrow, we need to make a decision. We do need to make a decision that's recognised by the world, really, as a council that can move forward. Paul's put it quite eloquently, I think, today, and that's been balanced up by various comments. But for me, I look at this and I see all the doubts. We are moving forward with hope, and Josh, in particular, Josh, it is with hope that we move forward. I've read this as well. I like you. I don't. Can we look at the future with any promise? I've read what I've seen, And it seems to be well thought out. Brighter people than me have put that together. So I'd say tomorrow we need to make a decision. Let's stop dilly-dallying around and get on with it. We've got a long, hard road anyway, whichever way we look at this. And that's all I'm going to say. And I do sit here quietly because if I've got nothing to add, I'm not just going to make noise. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Certainly don't want you to make any noise. But I will talk to officers and board members and think of a way of perhaps improving the layout to ensure that vice chairs are properly involved in the discussion.
Come back on that point. We're quite happy. we don't feel adrift. And if we want to say something, we do normally get heard. So don't worry. Don't worry, Chair. Okay.
If you're happy, I'm happy.
That's good.
Yep.
If only we could just reflect on that. Okay, bye-bye.
It is quite difficult from here. Sam, I think, was the person who left. And I'm just saying, physically, Marcus is in the way. It's actually quite hard to get the eye contact. It really is. And that's my best excuse. Marcus.
Chairman, just on that as a very brief aside, as a practical way forward, this layout is not the best, but if we go back to when we were at County Hall in the council chamber wasn't set up like this. It was set up in a rectangular square, okay? Now, whether that could be replicated in this chamber, probably not, but I see no reason why it couldn't be done in the conference room where we used to have our lunch, where it's already set up in that way quite a lot of the time. And so could we give serious thought to this meeting and indeed our scrutiny meetings taking place in there, which would completely avoid the situation that we've got? Yeah.
I would like to say that when a point is raised, before we move on to the next point, can we please just check that all members have had their say on that point? That would be really helpful, because I do feel like people are being missed and they want to come back to it after we've moved away from it onto another point. Thank you.
Again, we'll do our best to improve. Continuous improvement, that's what OSPB is all about. Nick, I was hoping to summate, but it better be important.
Yeah, could I just make a suggestion? Why don't you use the yellow voting card so you can clearly see?
We could start waving voting cards. I mean, Sam and I, between us, try to capture the list, and we're doing our best. Whether we can open up every line of inquiry to everybody before we move on, I'm not sure. It would be quite difficult. We'd need to be quite disciplined to keep to the same point. But we'll do what we can to see if we can do it even better. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the meeting. Not quite, though. I need to go to the board members, including the vice chairs, and say, we've been capturing some of the points that have been made and the answers that we've received. I'm not sure, looking at them, whether they justify something going out to all members ahead of tomorrow or not, or whether they're simply an aid memoir for us. I think probably the second is what I'm looking at. That being the case, the meeting is closed. Thank you, everybody, for attending.